Good evening. I know, it's me. Hmm. Chat, make co-host.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can't
I'm
hear
looking
you.
at my, you can hear me? I'm unmuted. Change role to attendee. I don't see make you a host, a co-host. Change role, rename.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure why I don't see, can't make you, it says I can make you a host, but I can't make you a co-host.
Oh, well,
Okay, let's see, make host.
but if you're also a host,
I'm the host,
then I don't think we need to worry as long as it's not Tony. And if you have not been experiencing power outages, then I think we're okay.
Oh, okay, not yet.
That was the concern. He was concerned that he might lose power.
Oh, okay, okay, so far so good on my end. Yesterday we had a little blackout, but now this is puzzling me.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Ann.
Interesting.
Oh, sorry. I need a bounce card. All right.
Like the gang is all here. And it is 6 o'clock on the dot. So I am going to call a special meeting of the KPPCSD to order, and we'll ask our clerk to take the roll, please.
Director Debbie,
Here.
Vice President Logan,
Here.
Director Natoli,
Here.
Director Sheriff Watt,
Here.
and President Hassai.
Here. So at this point in the meeting, we will go to public comment for any items that are on this agenda. And folks have up to 3 minutes to make comments if they wish or need. Let me see. Okay, I see Delk has her hand raised, so I'd like to call on Delk first. Go ahead, Delk. Hold on a minute, actually.
I allowed her to talk.
Yeah, you'll have to do that. I don't have that ability.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
All right. Hey, Stephen Still. I can't find California Code 94,596. Do you mean the Brown Act Code 54,956? And are that two separate, unrelated cases?
This relates to the closed session items, and I'll ask the council to speak to that. If the section is potentially miscited, and I'm not sure whether we need to answer the question about the litigation. You're muted, Anne. Anne, you're muted.
I'm terribly sorry. I have to plead dyslexia for this. It is in fact mistyped in both cases. It should be 5-4, not 9-4.
5-4,
5,
9-5.
yeah, 5-4-9. Yeah, I can pull it up and give you the exact one if you like. Or we can just amend it for future reference. I
I'm
don't know
just
how I-
asking you for clarification for the group.
It is the wrong code section. That is correct.
Thank you.
And what's the correct one, Ann?
I believe it's 54596.9.
No, it's not. I believe it's 54956.9.
Yeah,
Is that what I just said?
no, it's okay. It's not, but I think the correct citation, I believe, is 54956.9.
Yes.
So apologies for that, but that does happen. And the second question, again, I'm not sure that we have to or should answer about whether the cases are tied.
That is for the chair to decide.
I don't think we need to answer that or should.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sylvia Ellsbury needs to be recognized, please. There she goes. Sylvia, you should be able to unmute and talk.
Hi. You can hear me, yeah?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, as Sylvia said, this is Sylvia Ellsbury, KCC Board President. Thank you so much for adding the contract extension to tonight's agenda. I'm here to respectfully reiterate KCC's earlier request that the current contract be extended through to December 31st, 2022, which marks the end of the fall KSEP session and the midpoint of the fiscal year. KCC shares your good faith intention to ratify a new contract well before that time made this request. The challenges to achieving this have grown, not diminished. We believe December 31st is the appropriate extension date, and I respectfully reiterate this request on behalf of the KCC Board of Directors, as well as on behalf of the Kensington families and individuals that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you should be able to make Sylvia a participant again or an attendee again. And public comment. So I see that Director Deppie's hand is up. We should go to our first items, but I guess the council says we should go ahead and we can, Chris, you may go ahead and make a comment, I guess.
I just wanted to say, is the KCC contract extension on our agenda?
Yes, it's the next item.
Oh, it's before the closed session. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Right.
Okay,
Got
a
it.
common occurrence for us, the extension of teleconference meetings during states of emergency. As we know, if we do not pass this, if we do not adopt this resolution, then we are stuck in case there should be a need for anyone to participate remotely. And if we continue to, as we have found, there are still a public health challenge and the governor has had this remaining. So the recommended action is that we adopt resolution number 2022-23, a resolution of the Board of Directors. We can have discussion and then I can, I guess I can go to comment as well. Director Sharaswat.
Should any of us, even if we go to a hybrid meeting or in-person meeting, this allows for any board member who has been exposed or test positive with COVID to possibly join in a meeting remotely with a lot more ease than we typically have.
Yes, agreed. Any other board questions, discussion, comment? I will go to attendees, if there's any public comment on this. Could you please remove attendees, Sylvia Ellsbury and Delk from the participant screen? They should be, their permission to speak should be removed and their hand should be down, which I think it is, but they still show up as participants or panelists for some reason. Okay, there is no, oh, okay. Well, there is no public comment. So I make the motion that we adopt resolution number 22, 2022-23, making a resolution of the KPPCSD board, making findings and determining a need to continue holding remote meetings by teleconference. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And we'll take a roll.
Director Debbie,
Yes,
Vice President Logan,
No,
Director Natoli,
Yes.
Director Sheriff Swat,
Yes.
President Hassai.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, and the next item, as has been referenced, is considering an approval of the extension of the services agreement with the KCC. We have met several times. I believe we're making really good progress. There are challenges, as we all know, for our own staff and council and board members, as well as the KCC's staff and rather their board members in particular. And what has also come to light in the latest issue of the Outlook is that the KCC will be putting on, I think for the first time since the pandemic began, the traditional fall picnic, not the parade this time, but the picnic. And in particular, that is going to involve a lot of heavy lifting from the board members themselves, and in particular, Ann Forrest, who is one of the two designees from the KCC board. So I see here that we have an action, or at least a recommendation to provide an extension to October 31st. I would actually, if I may, suggest an amendment to even this to put it through November 30th, given that I know the month of October is going to be difficult for them and there will be some back and forth, but giving everyone as much time as possible. I respectfully have to disagree, or at least not at this moment. Extend this beyond that. This board will change over as of December. I know all of us want to see it resolved prior to a change in December. So I'm requesting, I'm going to suggest that we extend through November 30th. I see Director Deputy's
how
hand
long
is
have
up
you been
first.
working on this with the KCC?
I think we started in June, as Sylvia said. I honestly can't remember the dates. Rachelle and I, as you know, were made an ad hoc committee.
Right.
Normally, that purpose of the ad hoc committee would be given that Rick Benson departed, Tony came on board, and we had a lot of other contracts in the works. We kind of jumped in with both feet and have met with Ann Forrest and Kathy Garcia, I believe at least twice, and have just gotten some other information that would be helpful to us in wrapping up. And we have a good draft from General Counsel Danforth based on our last conversation with Ann and Kathy, in which we did a lot of back and forth, and I basically went through a list of things, and Rachelle and I, as ad hoc committee members, accepted already certain things that we think we'd be comfortable bringing forward. So we've made good progress. I think it's now a matter of, I would say by the end of next week, getting another version to the KCC.
Because it seems like it's been enough time. I can't see extending it past October 31st. I mean, it seems like there's been more than enough time to work out any kinks.
Well, I can't.
It's been 3 months so already. That's 5 months. I mean, it's not that complicated. So I think extending it to November 30th is too long.
Well, I agree it's not complicated. I would say that, we had vacations, we had COVID. I was sick with COVID myself for 2 weeks. We had vacations in between that on both sides. So I think we're always a little overly optimistic about what we can accomplish. But the reason I'm suggesting November is that the picnic rather, is the 23rd of October. They also have to meet as a board, and they meet once a month. I know that they can meet they have more flexibility to meet outside of strictures than we do. But I'm trying to be, operating in good faith here. It's not anyone's fault that it's not going well enough. I'd like to, after this next version goes to the KCC, kind of ask General Manager Constantouros to step in so that it can go faster without us being the frontline people, because it's really a lot of work for, I can't do a whole lot more at this point.
So when do you expect to bring it before the board?
If we provided another version to the KCC at the end of next week, I would hope that they would have enough time to potentially, and I can't speak for them, but they have a board meeting in the beginning of the within the first 2 weeks of October. They will of course have the picnic to be dealing with, but hopefully they will be able to respond to us before the end of October. I could see whether, so,
The thing is that there's no guarantee that what you bring before the board, we're going to approve, or we won't want some changes. And so if you bring it to us in November, that doesn't leave any time. I mean, I've asked for some things in the contract. I don't know how you're handling them. I know Eileen has some requests. I think we all have some ideas. And if you just come with a contract and say, this is what it is, it's too late, we have to approve it, that's really not on. We need some time to look at a draft and probably provide some comments, and then one more meeting to come up with the consolidated contract. So it's not like you're negotiating it to have a final version. You're negotiating some terms that the board is then going to approve, maybe not approve, maybe want to amend. So I think if it's going to be brought before the board in November, that's way too late. I would hope to see a draft the next meeting in October, so we could at least have a chance to comment on it. Because again, if you bring it in November, you're basically saying we don't have a chance to make any comments. And that's not what my understanding of what the ad hoc committee was about. It was about trying to come up with some draft that the board can then look at. So
yes, we're working very hard to come up with a draft that we think that the board shouldn't just look at, but that we hope to be able to smooth the way for both boards to accept. Obviously, you can have your own opinions, but and I don't know who suggested what to General Counsel Danforth, because that would be a violation of the Brown Act. So I can't, I don't know, but we could potentially bring a draft before the board. But if we have presented things to the KCC, then, it's not easy to have two entire boards negotiating. That's why we're doing it this way. So I don't know what I can say to your request. I suppose we could bring a draft to this board in October, and we could hope that we would have comments back from the KCC so that we could at least provide that draft with their feedback on it, I suppose. I mean, we can decide that for the October agenda, taking note of your request.
I completely agree with Director Deppie, and I don't see the need to have an extension of that length of time. And I don't see why KCC has any additional hurdles beyond our hurdles to schedule a meeting. We have by law the need to have a 24-hour notice. They're not subject to the Brown Act. They don't need a 24-hour public notice. They can meet sooner, I'm sure. And I think enough time has passed on this negotiation. I appreciate illness. I appreciate vacations, but this has been in the works for quite some time.
Well, we had hoped to make better progress, and I will apologize that the draft that General Counsel Danforth sent last week or early this week hasn't been forwarded, but I'm trying to perhaps let the perfect be the enemy of the good by getting things to a finer point based on outstanding issues. I can only make the request, and I would prefer that folks give us all a little more time, but you're entitled to your vote and your opinion. Director Sheriff Swat.
Yes, I totally understand the position of Director Natoli and Director Deppie, but I would also agree with President Hassai that at least going to the 30th of November is fair and offers some flexibility. I mean, further, I'd assure the KCC that we're certainly not going to in any way end programs mid-session or do anything like that. So I would want to give the assurance that, you're certainly going to be running programs through December 30th this year. And I believe, much longer. But
I would also add that there's a concern over the fiscal implications of any new contract, and I think we understand that, and we would have to account for some time in the final contract about when a new financial arrangement would go into play. And I personally don't think I would see anything happening prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year for us, the July 1st. Director Natoli.
I would be willing to give an extension to November 5th, but not to the end of November, because you get Thanksgiving, you get colds, you get flu, and this is just going to kick the can down the road further and further. So I think November 5th is sufficient time. And that would allow this to be discussed at the board meeting on November 10th.
Well, you're saying an extension of the contract to the 5th means the contract expires prior to the board meeting, our board meeting.
Well, okay, I see your point, but let's have the contract for discussion on November 5th, which means you need to wrap up your negotiations by November 5th.
So you would like the contract on the November 10th agenda, which means it would have to be on the, ready to go and be posted on the 7th.
That's right.
But we're talking here about when the contract would expire. And so even if we signed it and we agreed to it on the 10th, in the hopes that the KCC has already agreed to a version of that, then it would still need, to be implemented. A new contract provision would have to start. So when would the old one expire? And that's
Well, we could have the old one expire on November 15th, because if we don't put some time caps on this, it's just going to keep on kicking the can down the road.
Mhm. Well, looking at the calendar, I see that the 18th is the Friday before Thanksgiving. And to me, that might be, again, trying to accommodate everyone's desires. That's a good maybe end point, because I do agree that the Thanksgiving week becomes a little dicey anyway. So,
Right.
to me, I could see saying perhaps the 18th or the 20th or something. Like the 20th is a good round number. It's the Sunday of that weekend and gets it done before the holiday week.
Do it on the 18th, because people could be traveling on the 19th.
Okay. I would, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
So, is there any more discussion from board members? Director Deppy.
Yeah, is there any way, even if it was a closed session, just to see what kind of contract you've come up with? Because again, I have no idea what you and Rochelle have negotiated. I don't know if it certainly meets my requirements for a good contract. Obviously I'm just one board member, but we had that issue with the police and the chief of police, where we just had a contract thrown in front of us and it turned out not to be what we wanted. And so,
yeah, unfortunately, I
at
don't
least
believe...
have a closed session so you can discuss at least what you're thinking.
We are, I believe, and Anne can correct me, that it's not eligible for a closed session. It's not an item that can be discussed in closed session.
Well, it's financial negotiations, right?
Financial negotiations, excuse me, are not eligible. Only real estate transactions. And I don't think we've ever really regarded this as a real estate contract per se.
Well, I think it talks about building E in the contract potentially, so that's real estate.
It does, but I do think that's a bit of a stretch. However, I could send out an attorney-client privileged document draft. You could not discuss it amongst yourselves, but at least you would have time to review it in advance and be perhaps more prepared than you otherwise might be if you got it only 3 days before the meeting.
Well, I mean, I would like it in October, not before November.
I understand that. I would get it to you as quickly as I can.
So the idea would be that we would perhaps send the latest draft to KCC and hope that we and ask that we could get some kind of comment back in October before the, I don't know when in October, but in October. Is there some magic date that you think you should have seen it by for a purpose?
Well, I would like it by the October meeting so we could discuss it. And we had the initial contract at a public meeting. I don't know what the hesitation is to have a follow-up contract that was done without any consultation with the.
Yes, that is possible. That is possible. What I would hesitate is if we send something to the KCC. I mean, I guess we could do that. So I don't know, Anne, what do you think about that? I mean, it's possible that we would have sent a new draft to the KCC and not have had any comments, and then we would have another discussion, and you would then propose additional changes that we'd have to resend back to the KCC. So they wouldn't have any reason to look at what we send them now, knowing that you might change it on them in the back and forth.
I would hesitate to negotiate a contract in that way. I think once we send a draft to KCC, we really ought to wait for their comments before we prepare another draft. Now, of course, once we send a contract to KCC, it's a public document. There's certainly no harm in sending it to the board members and anyone else who would like to see it. But I think having the board provide comments before we've heard back from KCC would give rise to the kind of inefficiency that the president was just speaking of.
Well, then maybe the board should see it before you send it to KCC.
The board could schedule a special meeting if we want to keep this on track.
It will go off track if that meeting isn't by the end of next week, because that's when the next version was due to go to them.
So the next version is go to them end of next week. And then
No
how,
late, no later than, yeah, maybe
then how-
sooner.
and how soon will you get comments back from them?
I don't know. We haven't discussed that.
I mean, can't you just say we need it back in 2 weeks and then that would be.
Sure, we
okay?
can say that, but they needed it 2 weeks ago and I didn't get it to them and we didn't get it to them. So we can say that, sure.
I'm assuming you've had 3 months to talk about this, so I don't know why it would take more than maybe one meeting of their board to go through the final details.
Well, that is my hope too, because I believe we've had 2 really long and good productive sessions with the parties that have been charged with making this move forward. They're going to have their legal counsel look at it. Their legal counsel, I don't believe has seen it since, we've had conversations. So they're waiting for the next draft. I will certainly, they're on the phone today. They're hearing this conversation. We could certainly encourage it and try to get it to them, ASAP. But as I can tell you, I just can tell you that I can only do so much. And I've been charged with this with Rachel, and I can only do as much as I can do. And I hope that perhaps after this last version, General Manager Constanturos with support from Ann Danforth can take it perhaps the next step. Director Sharon-Swat.
My recommendation is that we hold off on the draft and we have a special meeting. I know that some of you may have read my email that I sent today, and I don't want to necessarily go into it, but realizing that our plate for October is very, very full and that we will require an extra meeting, I believe, between now and the end of October anyway. So if we can do that sooner rather than later, at the latest, maybe October 6th, and have this KCC contract be part of that. If we could do it prior to that, maybe then we're setting ourselves up more for success.
If we want to have a special session and we want to discuss this, I would suggest we do it as soon as possible, because the draft that is ready to go has the most substance stuff already, most of the substance in it.
When is their meeting? Isn't the second Monday of the month, or am I incorrect?
I think it's been moved to Tuesdays, and I can, if you will allow me, I will ask Sylvia Ellsbury to tell us exactly when their meetings are, because my brain is a little scrambled and I don't want to say the wrong thing. Sylvia, would you, sorry.
Hi.
Hi, thank you. Would you tell us when your meetings are?
Yep, our meeting, well, first of all, just FYI, you can always find our meeting schedule on our website.
I know now.
Our meetings are now, they used to be the first Monday of the month. And now, because of financial records not being available, monthly statements and whatnot from the bank by that first meeting, long story short, October 10th. October 10th is our October meeting.
So it's is it always the second Monday of the month?
Yeah, roughly, but it's
Okay.
best if you to consult the calendar that was created at the beginning of the year.
Got it. All right, thank you. I knew it had moved. I wasn't sure if it was second Monday or second Tuesday, so great. So again, I would suggest that we do this, next week, if possible, honestly, so that we could get something to them and give them 2 to 3 weeks to have a conversation, bring it to their board and bring us comments.
I respectfully disagree. I would rather wait 2 weeks, simply because if we have to have a special meeting, I think we can add some other things to it that we need to get done outside of contracts and things. So perhaps like the 22nd, so that they have a lot of time to look at it and digest it and discuss it. But I don't know everyone's travel schedule or fall schedule, but.
Right. So arranging a special meeting is a whole separate thing. We're now we do have an item before us around approving a contract extension.
Okay.
The latest on the table was November 18th, and I think we should deal with that. And then we can schedule a special meeting, not even on the phone. We don't have to do it, or we can, I don't know, Anne, when how and when we do that. But if October 22nd works and people want to do that, then the benefit of that would be that board members would have seen a draft. We'll have a special meeting for them to comment on it. And that would potentially, in a way, advance things in that the whole board would be presenting a document that not just the ad hoc committee would, be agreeing to then. So, Anne, can you just guide me on, should we just handle the motion in front of us, the recommended action? And then,
I would recommend that you do that first. And then if you can easily set a special meeting date, that's great. Otherwise, staff can reach out and suggest different special meeting date.
okay, so the recommended action is approving a contract extension, extending the 2017 agreement to provide, or at least my proposed motion is to approve a contract extension of the 2017 agreement to provide the recreational services for KCC to provide those services to November 18th, 2022. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Director Natoli came in first with that. And I'll ask the clerk to take a roll.
Director Deppy,
Yes.
Vice President Logan,
Yes.
Director Natoli,
Yes.
Director Sheriff Watt,
Yes.
and President Hassai.
Yes.
And I will be on vacation September 10th through the 24th.
Okay, thank you. We'll
It's
have to figure
time.
that part out. So I think the question, notwithstanding our clerk's vacation, is whether or not the proposed date proposed by Director Sheriff Watt of September 22nd is a possibility for a special meeting to discuss the KCC contract, which means it would have to be circulated prior to that, and it would be an open discussion of the contract.
I can't make that meeting.
Okay, well, that's not going to be a good day. So why don't we do that separately? And again, I would encourage people to try to do it sooner rather than later, to be fair to the KCC, please. I mean, sooner in the reasonable time frame. Okay, so that concludes the public portion of our meeting. Thanks to members of the public for joining us, and we're going to be adjourning to a closed session. We will be coming back, hopefully not too late for our regular meeting at 7. We may be a little delayed, and we'll report out at that point, at that time. Thank you. Good night or goodbye for the moment.
Yes, I know the board's in closed session. Turn on some lights while I'm waiting. Oh, Bobby, I know. What's that? Everything just rumbled. It was, I think, a bus or truck. Didn't feel like a bus or truck. By the way, you might want to feed kitties before you go. Oh, interesting. Nothing. Hello again. By the way, before we go live,
I like yours too, Anne.
my hearing,
It's not appropriate.
it only changes from the weather, because of the weather, but Linnell's looks new to me.
Yeah, well, it all looks great.
Ann, did you say, Tony, your hair is adorable?
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. I was talking about your hair. Absolutely.
I wasn't sure. I thought so.
Absolutely.
Oh, did everyone get the email from Supervisor Joya that on Friday they're starting the Omicron boosters in Contra Costa County?
I did
And-
not see that. Thank you.
And I know at Richmond Auditorium in Concord, and at the Rodriguez Community Center in Antioch. And I think you can walk in. They're very, very good. So big kudos to.
300 degrees,
Or-
right?
It doesn't matter if you live in Contra Costa. If you work in Contra Costa, you are eligible. So
Good to know. I do want to get that shot.
Okay.
And pulling up the agenda. Where is the agenda?
Linnell, are you able to make Delk a attendee?
The problem is that she hasn't,
you're
her
muted.
microphone hasn't been muted by the host. That's the problem.
Well, that doesn't even matter to me, but she shouldn't be showing up on this participant screen.
Right, but she's not she's an attendee in the list, but the microphone is
Oh,
still
So
available.
can you,
to talk, so I think you
yeah,
have to-
you have to mute Delk or remove permission to talk,
Exactly.
Okay,
but she's still there, see?
she's still here, but I show her as an attendee. And I just muted. Well, I can mute everybody.
I don't see her as as a panelist.
I don't
Okay.
either.
That's weird. It's just. on my
I
screen.
see her as a panelist.
I see her as a panelist.
No, she's in the panelist screen, but she's not a panelist.
That's weird.
Okay,
No. Oh,
still weird.
Yeah.
All right, let's see, I believe we are all here. So we will call the regular meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. And I will make the announcement from closed session that we gave direction to our council. And we will take the roll call for the regular meeting, please.
Okay, Director Deppie,
Yes,
Vice President Logan,
yes. Here.
Director Natoli,
Here,
Director Sheriff Swat. Director Sheriff Swat,
yes.
yes, and President Hassan.
Here. So we're coming to the portion of our meeting where we have public comment and consent calendar items. And I'll just read our standard language, which is that all matters on the consent calendar are considered routine and are approved by one motion and vote unless a board member or general manager first requests that a matter be removed for separate discussion and action. Individuals wishing to address the board of directors concerning consent calendar items or on matters to make oral comments of usually up to 3 minutes unless we have a lot of people. Please raise your hand via Zoom, and when you are called on by me, you will be unmuted and can address the board of directors. If you don't mind, please state your name clearly for the audio recording, although it is not required. You are requested to address your comments to the board of directors and not to staff or other members of the audience. By state law, the board is not permitted to take any action or discussion on any item that does not appear on the posted agenda. And if you have anything you would like to be distributed to the board at any time, you can email it or mail it to the clerk of the board. Director Sheriff Watt.
sorry, it frequently asked.
That's what I was struggling to say. I knew there was one thing I wanted to say. Thank you. All right, so we'll go to public comment, and Delk's hand is the first one I see. So Delk, the clerk will give you permission to speak, and then you can go ahead and make your comment.
Hey, Stephen Delk, you can hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Last year, a new auditor placed all of the accumulated Bayview franchise fee revenue in the unassigned category of the general fund because he understood doing on a continual basis. But that was not correct. For the previous 7 years, 2 different auditors had classified the franchise fee revenue as restricted based on GASB definitions and possibly Article 8C of the California Constitution. In addition, during a 2020 board meeting, the franchise fee was discussed and district council, I might suggest you put it in the restricted fund, close quote. Apparently because a relevant case had just reached the California Supreme Court. Last month, the court ruled in that case, Zolli v.
Oakland.
Delk, we just lost your audio. You hit mute by mistake. We heard Zolli v. Oakland. Can you unmute yourself or perhaps?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Don't know how that happened.
That's okay. It happens.
All right. Last month, the court ruled in that, among other things, the city claimed its garbage fees were exempt from voter approval because they were established through bona fide contract negotiations with private companies and were compensation for Oakland's property interests. That is, use of its streets and or the value of the franchise itself. The court rejected those and all other arguments, including that the plaintiffs had no standing because not the ratepayers. Oakland lost and might have to refund $200 million in fees collected since 2014. In light of the Supreme Court decision in Zolli, I might suggest that the district review its policy regarding how it enacts Bayview's franchise fee and classifies and spends the revenue going back to 2015. Thank you.
Thank you. That is certainly a substantive matter which we would have to agendize, and I would suggest that we look at that when we do our budget revision. Any comments on items not on the agenda? Okay, there are none. So we will go and has anybody desiring to pull anything off of the consent calendar from the board or the GM? Okay. So then the items on the consent calendar include minutes for the July 14th, 28th, and August 11th meetings, and 22 financial reports. So I would make a motion that we adopt the items on the consent calendar. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Director Deppie,
Yes,
Vice President Logan,
Yes,
Director Natoli,
Yes,
Director Shira Watt,
Yes.
and President Assai.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. The next item is a discussion on implementation of hybrid meetings. And this is going to be presented by General Manager, Interim General
Thank
Manager.
you, President Hassai. And I'll ask the clerk, Mr. John Scheich would be zooming into the meeting shortly. Oh, I think that might be him.
Here he is.
So let me give you a little background and I'll turn over the presentation to him. And it's really an opportunity for the board to interact with Mr. Scheich and to ask any questions about how these meetings work, because it is a little bit of a new frontier in local government. Since the early part of 2020, when the pandemic first broke out, and have continued in that time period to the present, they offered a safety from different locations and convenience at the same time. But they lost the in-person give and take and discussion and interaction of in-person meetings. Local governments have been slowly going to different types of hybrid meetings, but that has been going on very recently. And the board asked that we look into this and consider it. And that's what has led to this agenda item for tonight. There are some health requirements that various governments have, local governments have adopted. I've included that what the county health services recommends for public meetings. They include wearing face masks and the possibility of optional face mask wearing for fully vaccinated individuals, social distancing, and separately that meetings be attended on a voluntary basis, that they not be required attendance. There are people who still do not want to risk being in contact with someone who may have COVID, or just being around a lot of people, or may have some safety or health issues that they have that they don't want to share with publicly, and so would prefer to meet off-site. It is an ongoing pandemic. It has not been resolved, and these variants continue to come up periodically, and there's new ones, and the health community is not quite in complete control of this of COVID. So there's some unanticipated problems that may occur and may result in having to go back to fully online meetings in the future. We're recommending that first of all, with this with the system, and he is and the ASG company is the actual company that originally installed the system that is currently available in the community center. So they're very familiar with the system and what needs to be done. And they've been going through a upgrade of the system to allow for hybrid meetings, which is nearly complete. He can update you on that. He also recommends, agree with this, that a senior engineer, if the board goes ahead with these meetings, be present for the first two meetings, because we don't have the technical staff to, in case there's a problem or something's not working properly, or even to answer any questions that may come up. These engineers are not inexpensive. They're $800 per meeting. We think we can get by with the first two meetings, and then we'll see what we've learned. There's a possibility that staff can take over for sure, but we'll see how it goes for the first couple of meetings. There are other organizations that may need our help and have some questions, such as the fire district, and we want to be helpful to them also in terms of their meetings and answer any questions they have. So at the end, our recommendation is you consider starting next month with a hybrid meeting. And I'll turn this over with the board president's approval to Mr. Scheich to add anything to the presentation and also answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, is it okay if I show my camera?
Oh, please.
Okay. Just see, there's some audio overlap. Those are actually the biggest worries are often audio problems. I don't know if, has everyone been to the community center and seen the setup of the AV equipment that exists currently?
Um, do you mean that the camera that was there? So you should know that that community center underwent an extensive renovation. So, and then the pandemic hit, so we have not, there was a camera mounted to from a beam in the ceiling, which allowed for a fairly high level view of the of the whole the dais, the podium where people spoke mostly, and then there were just individual mics for the board members. That's the setup we know. Director Sharaswat, do you have any questions or something to add?
Yeah, so
Excuse me, I'm just asking that Delk be muted and screen. There were noises that were coming from not you, Mr. Scheich. So I just want to thank
Okay.
you. And yeah, thank you.
I want to say one other thing. Sorry, this is the hybrid meetings. If you see anyone on your screen who is not a panelist, there is a place under participants to select hide non-video participant or something like that. And that's how I was able to remove Delk from my screen. So there's nothing to do with central control. It's also the view. All right, Mr. Scheich, thank you. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about the setup as it is, and also handle a hybrid meeting, because a lot of us have experiences with different groups, churches, other things, and it's proven to be fairly not so simple, actually.
So a good reason maybe to have an engineer on hand for at least the first couple of meetings. In terms of the system that exists today, there's a ceiling camera. The room is rectangular, and in terms of the length of on one end of the room is where it's intended for council members to be seated and to be in view of the camera screen that goes up or down. So typically, if in case there's some audience in the room, you bring the screen down so that any documentation, slides, whatever, can be presented on the screen behind the board members. In addition, for the spoken word, there are microphones that are put out on the table for the individual council members. There's a computer, and this master laptop, if you will, is used by the clerk, and that is used to present material to that screen. So that is pretty much the system.
Podium for members of the public.
And a mic for the very good point. So the upgrade is really to just be able to add the ability to incorporate the existing system with Zoom. And to do that, it will actually work with the clerk's computer, laptop. And to do that, what we're doing is we're bringing the feed from the system back out into the computer so that what the camera sees, what those microphones hear, will be brought into the laptop and from the laptop presented into Zoom. So that's part of Zoom now. For any board members to be able to see anything that's being presented on Zoom, they can use their individual laptops as viewing devices. They won't be the speakers and they won't be the microphones, because we have the individual microphones, and we want to have that kind of separation to prevent feedback. In terms of being able to show materials, the materials that are being presented from the clerk's laptop will be visible to the screen, and they'll also be visible. They can be chosen to be presented on Zoom. It's just using the share feature, the share screen feature that Zoom has. What we did is about a week ago, we went in and we actually tested this. We installed the equipment externally, but the requirement of the installation is to go back and do the wiring so that it'll be from the closet laptop sits. In the way the room is designed, the far end of the room, actually, there's a whole little cubby hole for connecting the laptop, etc. And that's where the clerk would be seated. Sorry, I can't hear.
And a line could be run for, like, the clerk could actually be seated somewhere else if the line was long enough to run. Because usually the clerk sits with the staff.
We'll have to provide some additional equipment to extend that. Right now, the limitation is about maximum 10 feet from the cubby hole.
Okay. And for board members, traditionally, when there is something being presented behind us, we get up and we move into the audience. But if the screen was kept above our heads, we could actually stay seated at the dais with our laptops and plug into the Zoom feed and see it in front of us and without having to move. And it would be above our heads for the audience, and it would be fed through Zoom for anyone watching remotely.
Yes.
That's a benefit. Okay. Does anyone, and the mics, so there is the mic public and for staff, so it could be actually as many as 8 mics. The feedback issue, of course, as you mentioned, is real. That means that the clerk's computer and the board members' computers would have to be muted, and the microphones would be the only outgoing feed, and you need your computer muted so that there is no feedback.
Correct. So if you wanted someone who was from the outside, remote, to talk, they would have to unmute their laptop. But in general, laptops would.
Does anyone else have questions? Director Deppy?
Yeah, so I've got, well, let me just, it's really, I guess it's not clear completely what this hybrid meeting would look like. Are you saying that we would have a Zoom webinar like we do now? And if, let's say I'm remote, I'm a director and I'm logging into the Zoom webinar, what do I see on my screen?
If you are remote, you would see that master ceiling camera presenting the members of the council. Or if the clerk decided to show a documentation, you would be seeing the document that was being presented to the group.
And how about the public speaker? How would I see that?
The way the camera is set up, the camera is wide to that front of the room where the screen is. So in order to see a person coming up to the podium, they would have to come up to that front of the room, and they'd have to turn toward the audience so that we'd be looking toward them rather the back of their head. If you want that person on the podium to be visible.
Well, I'm just asking. I mean, I guess that's for the board, but we typically ask the speakers to address the board. So my guess is that what I would be seeing in one of the Zoom panels is what we typically would see in the recording of our previous meetings. It would be that overview. Would it be in just one of the many Zoom panels? Because let's say we had 3 board members and an attorney and the general manager were all calling into Zoom. Is that then board overview also just one more Zoom panel on the screen?
So the view of the camera, it's a single camera,
right?
But it's a wide view, so it's that whole front of the room. So all of that would be available. The way that Zoom can be set up, you can set it up as either a gallery or as a spotlight, so that main camera would take up the majority of the screen. Like I said, if that person who comes up from the audience is to be seen on camera, then they're going to have to come up to be in view of that camera and probably want to turn that direction of the audience.
I can imagine what it would look like because we've seen many video recordings with the system itself. So who's using this right now? So we could look at.
Every system is unique. So I mean, people are doing Zoom sessions that are hybrid, that are all Zoom, etc. I've been involved in a lot of work from home systems. Personally, I have been involved in probably about 400 work from home systems. And we've also designed systems for doing things like fitness instruction from homes and from small studios and things of that sort. But in terms of seeing how this would work with your existing AV system, that's why we actually went in physically and actually tested it and set it up and had an opportunity for Linnell and Lisa and a few others to actually see how it would work. So we kind of ran that test the other week.
There's no board that you could say this is the kind of thing that you're going to be seeing.
Every place has different equipment, different setup. A lot of
Okay.
larger town councils have a whole production switcher, etc., an operator for that. So in terms of being able to come up immediately with an example that's identical to this, I'm sorry, no, I can't.
All right. When we have a board discussion, I think that's more appropriate because he's answered my questions.
Director Sharon-Swat?
So what is the audience portion of, I mean, they're the at-home participant? Presumably board members, of course, or staff who are remote are going to be able to speak and things, but what about the at-home? Is that a matter of protocol, or is it more of a live stream? An at-home person could participate, but we would have to adapt that into our meetings.
Yeah, so any at-home participants are part of your gallery. They're part of your Zoom, part of your Zoom participants. From the way it's been described to me, the preference is that they would not be seen, but that they would be heard. So to be heard, they'll have to unmute themselves, or you'll have to unmute them. But there's no problem with that. And we did test when we did our test the other week. What we did is we had paid as a remote person, as if they were calling in, and we checked that they could be heard through the speaker system.
Okay. I also have a couple of questions, but these are probably for Ann Danforth, so I don't know if I should ask away. In terms of protocol, if now's the time, do we need to pass, if we develop protocols, do those need to be adopted at another meeting?
If so, we could do so at the outset of the next meeting. I don't believe so. There was legislation pending in the legislature to adopt new provisions for the Brown Act remote meetings, but I believe that died. We've been doing until the legislature decides to act.
Oh, I guess I mean on the health services protocols. Am I being clear? Those, if we passed a series of protocol, like, can we require masking of everyone? If we do that, if we have a list of protocols, kind of like this, what the Contra Costa County Health, Contra Costa, do we need to pass that at another meeting?
I would recommend that it be passed by resolution at another meeting, but you could do it at the beginning of a meeting.
Okay, we can do that at a special meeting though.
That's true too, yes.
Okay, so we should do it, okay. And then can we require masking of everyone who's there?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Deppie?
Yeah, there was a one line item. The recommendations number 2, it says consider any equipment computers is there any additional costs and additional computers that we would need?
Are you referring to the AV system now?
Well, just in general, maybe you didn't write the agenda report, so maybe you don't really know what I'm talking about, but it seemed to imply that there might be more computer systems needed beyond what you've already done. But
well, let me explain that. I understood that laptops were required of all of the board members to participate in the system. And that I didn't know if any laptop was could be utilized or personal laptops could be used, or whether the board new laptops that were compatible had to be purchased for each individual member that would stay at the district. So that item was in there to raise the question, but I think Mr. Scheich can answer that question now.
So in terms of, let me just make sure I'm speaking. So in terms of the operation of the system, and we tested that, and we had the right connections in terms of interfacing, connecting, and so on. So there's no problem there. In terms of individual council members, as long as it's okay to use personal devices or the laptops that you have, Zoom is a very flexible solution that works on Mac and PC, so that I don't see any problem there. In fact, council members could even share if they just, want to, in terms of looking on. So the only purpose of the laptops really is just being able, since you're all there anyway, for the most part, it's only to the point of looking maybe at documents and things like that. So off the top of my head, I'd say we wouldn't require any more laptops or any more computers or devices, in terms of the way that the system has been suggested or tested today.
But if we wanted to see the Zoom meeting as it's unfolding, or the webinar, I should say, we'll need some kind of device to watch that on the dais.
I'm sorry, but wouldn't you bring your own computers for that, your own laptops for that?
That's what I'm saying, is that's the purpose of that, is to monitor the Zoom meeting, because there might be attendees who might want to see the list of attendees, and we might want to see any presentation that's shooting behind us that we can't see because we're facing the wrong way, that kind of stuff. Right.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in just quickly because it's on this point. If you wanted the individual board members to be visible the way we are today to our home audience, then we could, in fact, have the camera on, be dialed into Zoom. We could be, I think we could be selected as a participant in Zoom so that the screen could have the big picture view, but it could also have individual board members' view. And then whoever's speaking, I think the way I understand it sometimes was speaking at the podium, because that mic is the one generating the sound, that person would be visible. When the speaker changed to a board member, perhaps responding in a comment, they could also be on the screen at home, as opposed to just the big view. You could have multiple, participants, if you will. The big camera is a participant, it's the big view, and then everyone sitting in the meeting could have their camera turned on, be dialed into Zoom, and they would be viewed from the home more closely. Is that not correct, or is that correct? And you might not want that, but is it possible?
I would say it's possible. We didn't specifically test it, but I would say it's possible.
And I also wanted to ask about Director Sharis Watt and I don't know if you'll remember this, at a CSDA conference, saw this really interesting system. And since this system now is probably at least 5, maybe 6 years old, that was very inexpensive. And it was a camera mounted, on the floor with a tripod, and it was remote controlled and provided a live feed. I just wonder whether there are other systems available besides this big view that might be better suited for this kind of hybrid meeting.
I mean, yeah, there's products like Pivot and Owl and all kinds of things that they turn according to who is talking at the moment, which is popular in things like schools and things. But since you have a fantastic system, I would say, use the fantastic system you have. And, what was missing from it was its ability to be used for Zoom. It was really originally designed for in-person attendance. So, but now that you have that, now you have Zoom, use it. And then if you feel like you want more capabilities and so on, you know, I'm sure those things can be added. And Zoom,
Director Deputy, do you have anything else?
No, sorry.
All right, Director Sharon Watt and then Director Logan.
I just want to say that I think that as a board member, if we are requiring board directors to have laptops at meetings, that they should be supplied by the district and be exclusively for the district. And I think that it's only fair that the equipment stays and is provided by the district. Some of us may be using, you know, desktops, systems and things at home, which are different. So if that is going to be a portion of our hybrid meeting, then I want that provided for any staff member, of course.
Vice President.
On to Rochelle, whatever. Even though it's all everyone does Zoom and all this, I'm sure if everyone's got a laptop, that one person's laptop is somehow going to have an issue during a meeting. And so I think that I agree with Rochelle. We should look for cheap laptops to stay with the system. My point is, and I'm from a visual world, whatever, you know, the first step always is to keep it simple and then work from there. And I think that, you know, it's really anticipation, and make sure they work. The main kinks I want to make sure is that a participant in the meeting can be heard without feedback, and so the meeting can continue. I think if we get too far into what else can we do to this, we'll never get through a meeting for 6 months, because I mean, each time is just going to take us so long. So just great ideas, but I really, really think we should keep it simple.
Okay. Any more board questions, comments, discussion for the moment before I go to public comment? Okay. I'm going to go to public comment. Somebody with the initials or the MC has their hand raised. So if they can unmute themselves.
Hi.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was very encouraged until the last, it's Mark Costantini. You don't have to buy laptops, you know, for the entire police board to do this. This is very simple. I'm a professional photographer. Mr. Scheich is an ace. I don't know who he is. I don't know. But I've been doing this all my life. And if you just want to, the simplest way to, I think for the 2 first meetings, that's number one. If you look at El Cerrito City Council, that's what Mr. Logan, who is a professional video guy, would know is a camera A, camera B, camera C operation.
Yeah.
Which is an overall close up on the each city council person talking and a close up on the public commenter. Considering the IT infrastructure hardware stuff, at least I don't know what you have for software that you have already in there, you don't have to spend a dime. And I really signed on here to say hi, because there are, I got to tell you, 800 people that want to start showing up to these meetings, you know, in person. And so I'm encouraged by your openness to consider actual live meetings, which are that's what it's going to, you know. But for the video stuff, this is preschool, you know. You know, and Mr. Scheich can tell you that probably that if you're signed on to this thing we're talking about, why add 6 more of hardware? You know, I'm sorry. So that's my comment. But I'm very encouraged. The overall comment is very positive that you were open to getting, particularly Safe Kids in the future, into the meetings to talk to you and to face them and to get the reality of the, I don't want to say rage or whatever, you know, but so you get a real, like the Matrix meetings, like the reality of what you've created here, you know. But you don't need to buy like a buttload of laptops. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done. Thank you. And I really appreciate, this is meant to be a positive. A camera, B camera, C camera, no laptops. You've got a kick-ass system in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there are no other attendees with comments on this item. I guess Director Sheriff Swat and then Director Deppie.
I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that this is going to slow our first several meetings way down. So I want to be really clear that, you know, everyone's aware that this will slow our meetings way down, just, you know.
Director Deppie?
Yeah, that's along the same lines. When we moved to Zoom, we had to move to Zoom. We didn't have to go to Zoom. We had to go to some kind of a remote system. We didn't have a choice. But what we did is we did a board trial meeting just to try to work out some of the kinks. And it still took, 2 or 3 meetings, I think, to get a smooth, even close to a smooth operation. I guess depending on who you talk to. But I would suggest, and I've got some issues with some of these, but if we did go to hybrid, that we would have a trial non-critical meeting of the board and public. Because I see that what's coming up in October and even November, there's a lot of really important issues. And I'd hate to have those meetings either bogged down or hijacked because the technology just wasn't ready or there was just too many issues. So I would both suggest that we do some kind of a trial, have to be a board or a Brown Act meeting so we could actually do it, but something that's non-critical, and I'm not sure how that would happen, but do that first and then evaluate, is this ready for prime time? Or do we really want to have this in an important board meeting? Because I don't want to find out in a board meeting where we're talking about the chief's contract and the MOU for the police and the KCC's contract that it's a mess and it doesn't work, because that would be a real problem. So again, I would suggest some kind of a trial run with, I don't know, it could be a presentation, could just be purely to test the system out and try to get as many helpers as possible, both remote and in person. And as far as in person, it does seem, have you thought about the ventilation of the community center? You're going to be, closed doors, and if you read the cost of health guidelines, the ventilation and air filtration is really an important issue. So I don't know if that's been even considered. Are we going to have hand sanitizer stations? You go into most stores and they've got 1 or 2 hand sanitizers that you can use when you come in. Have you talked about who's going to clean the microphone after each use? Because that's probably what you'd have to do. You'd have to typically is done. So just as far as the COVID protocols beyond the masking, has that been thought of, and has that been discussed? And it does say, that the health services is strongly recommending online meetings more practical. And so I know a lot of people want to go back in person, but I personally would suggest that this is held off until maybe the case rates really remain low, or they're going down, but we don't know what's going to happen in a month or two. This format does work. It's not perfect. And I'd hate to see it really messed up, both for technical reasons and also because maybe it wasn't safe yet. So that's it's my feeling. Even no matter what, a trial, complete board meeting, Brown Act agendized, and the whole thing before we actually sort of do a trial by fire.
I would like to just respond to a few things which around the ventilation. I mean, clearly we have the ability to open those doors now, and there are clear story windows that now open on the opposite wall above the cinder block wall. So that does create a cross ventilation, but it might be worth getting a study, like there is a way to check, to get a ventilation study. We did, our entire office, all of our offices were required to do that. And if we wanted to authorize that, so for example, there may be times when you can't have the windows open, it's too windy, it's too cold. We should understand perhaps, what if any, that may not be necessary for holding the first meeting. It may just be a longer term thing to check out, I think, because we could open windows in the meantime. I also think as far as sanitization, it would be worth checking that out. I think that the primary transmission has been shown to be, aerosols, and we should just look at what the best, I've seen places that are still doing clean pens, used pens, but I don't know that that's really necessary anymore. So I think we should just understand, maybe authorize the GM to kind of look at what the best practices are around some of those points you raised, I would suggest. Director Sheriff Watt had her hand up.
I was just going to suggest that perhaps, Madam President, you appoint a board director or two to work with Ann Danforth to make suggestions based on science. I mean, or it could go to the GM, of course, too. But I know he's a busy man, so I don't know. He's done so much. Thank you for this, Tony, and thank you, Mr. Scheich. This was very helpful, and so that would be my suggestion, because if we have to adopt it at the protocol for hybrid meetings at a special meeting, or you want it kind of done sooner rather than later.
So I think that we could task the general manager and the general counsel to come up with that, and the general manager could seek feedback individually from board members. Have an interest in this, then I would suggest that of all board members, that she could be someone that could be consulted. But I believe everybody, you could consult with everybody as long as we give feedback separately back, correct? And
Yes, although I think it, as long as these comments were not aggregated, I think though that ultimately the resolution needs to be considered in a public meeting.
Right. Would anybody else in particular with looking at these protocols? So let's just instruct you to work with Director Sheriff Watt, and you could work with up to one other board member if you choose to. And since I consult on the agenda, it could be me. General Manager Constantinos.
I think the idea of a practice meeting is a good idea that the board should consider, where there isn't a series of agenda items that must be acted on, and we're having technical difficulties at the same time. And we can schedule a meeting sometime. We could defer starting this until November, and in October, schedule just a practice meeting, an orientation meeting. Everything is set up. Everyone comes to the meeting. What buttons you push, what computers are available, and then decide. It'd have to be a noticed meeting, and then decide whether to go forward or not. And there wouldn't be any agenda items at that meeting. It would just be an orientation practice session for the board.
Okay, I think we could try to set that up as soon as practicable, whatever that means. It may or may not mean that we could have our October meeting in this way, but that I don't believe we have to opted the resolution around the emergency measures. Whether we call the meeting in person or hybrid could be deferred till later. I mean, I think that we would have the practice meeting, so that would be publicly agendized, and then we would probably be discussing having this meeting then. So I think we could just not set a perfectly strict timetable, but try to get that done. So if we're able to do it before the October meeting, it happens, but if we're not, it won't.
Another possibility, I don't know if this is possible, is to have that practice session right before the October meeting. So we only have one meeting, but I don't know if the community center is available. We'd have to check the schedule. So we meet an hour ahead, maybe an hour and a half ahead, and practice, see how it works. Mr. Scheich would have to also be available, or his engineers, we go.
I think that could be problematic only because if there's a problem, we would have noticed a meeting at the location of the community center. And I think that's potentially problematic. I don't know what you think.
Moving it without canceling it, that is problematic.
It would be moved completely to Zoom. What would happen, but we would be racing from the community center back to our homes. So I don't think that, I wouldn't suggest that, honestly.
I agree.
It's a little too close for comfort. It would have to probably be done prior to the posting of the agenda for the regular meeting or a special meeting. Director Shariswat.
I was going to just be in agreement. I think maybe, no later than the 6th of October, if we can. And we do have a couple of things that are, I've been noting all the work that we've got. We have a couple of things that are very minor, and if they were not done at that special forward, but we've discussed a few items that could be agendized that would be are kind of housekeeping things that maybe could be done at that kind of meeting, that if it didn't go right, fine, but otherwise we would get a little work done.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to the establishing the hybrid success.
Director Natoli.
I was going to suggest having a practice session earlier, but I think it doesn't need to be a meeting. I think that you might be able to gain a lot of insight by just having 1 or 2 directors present without a meeting and just work out some of the logistics, because this is far more complicated than I think a lot of people had realized. Every organization that I know that tried a hybrid meeting has given up on it. So I think it's worth doing a test with 1 or 2 directors just to work out some of the.
Could include as up to 5, and because it's publicly noticed. So if we couldn't do it, I mean, I think everyone could be invited, but it would be a publicly noticed meeting then. That's all. Mr. Scheich.
Just if you want to do a test, in addition to a few directors, you'll need to ask the clerk to be available, because she knows how to produce the document and so on. So that would be part of that test.
And she will be away the 10th to 24th of this month, correct?
The 24th. So it would have to be after the 24th.
Okay. All right. So I think Director Deppie, yes.
No, just senior engineer at the meeting. It's not just to run it. It's in fact, it's more specifically in case something goes wrong, and they can then fix it. What happens if it really goes wrong and it can't be fixed? I guess we just have to cancel the meeting. Is that the case?
Or do we continue? Can we continue only on Zoom?
Well, yeah, that would just my thought too, is that let's say you're at the community center, you have Wi-Fi access. So you have person would have to go home and get logged on to Zoom.
Right.
So I don't know. It doesn't seem like we could change in midstream from hybrid to online only, or vice versa. I think we're kind of, once we open a meeting with hybrid, we're stuck with that. And my point is that I think 2 meetings might not be enough, because sure, senior engineers for 2 meetings and it works great. The 3rd meeting, everything breaks down. I don't expect Linnell to start debugging software. So I think we have to look at probably a longer period of having a senior engineer at these meetings until we're comfortable that nothing really is going to go wrong.
Mr. Scheich?
Tony had brought that if an engineer is required for future meetings, that we can make a person available.
Okay. So I think I also want to just offer my own personal comment about the issue of laptops. I'm perfectly comfortable myself using my own. I do think that having at least a couple available, I don't think we should run out and buy 5 or 6 all at once, but I do think it's, we use our personal everything for this position, and, carrying, you could easily from in the office, and I got all the way to the office, left my laptop at home. So I think we should have some extra ones available. And then, if a director does not want to use their personal laptop for whatever reason, that could be a request that's made. I think we should be cognizant of budget. We have a budget revision coming up. So I think we should just approach that kind of carefully, seeing what people's preferences are, but also making sure we have at least one or two extra ones available should something go wrong or should someone forget theirs. That's my interest.
I had a question for Mr. Strike. Is there, our discussion has been focused on either a hybrid or a non-hybrid. Is there something, a compromise in between that we could take a step toward a hybrid meeting, see how it goes, and then move to a hybrid meeting? Is that possible?
I'm sorry, I guess I don't know what you mean exactly. I mean, hybrid just means that you're using the space and you're also Zoom at the same time.
Intermediary step that we could take without moving to a complete hybrid meeting.
Like being a little pregnant.
I think the intermediate step would be to do a test as full-fledged as you can do it of a hybrid meeting, and see how that works for you. That would be my recommendation. I'm not sure what a lesser hybrid would mean. I mean, so I would say do a full run through, as complete as you can, and then get a good sense of how that.
I don't know
works
whose
for you.
hand was up first. I see Director Deppie and Director Sharis-Watt's hands up. Director Sharis-Watt, maybe.
I just asked, Anne, can we notice just an in-person meeting? And if it happens to be hybrid, that's great. But we're not making any promises that the hybrid will work, because I appreciate,
That's getting into undiscovered territory.
Okay.
Usually we like to be definitive in our agendas as to how members of the public may participate. If we tell people that they might be able to participate in person, but might not, I don't know if that's a clear violation. We're in very strange territory with these hybrid meetings.
What if we just tell them they can't participate remotely, and then we just, practice, you have to come in person?
We could have
Because that would prevent the cancellation. If we get to the community center and the hybrid even after a trial doesn't work. As Director Debbie was saying, we have just such important things on our agenda for the next couple of months. I don't want to blow a meeting, especially we're stuck for a month because we can't discuss the salary.
Yeah.
So
Why don't we just try the test and then sort of see? I think we're, I understand the, wanting to do it right, but I think it's very hard to test, only have it in person and then have this open Zoom that no one knows about to test it. That won't be a real test. So I think we should just try the test and kind of discuss it then. And, Director Deppie.
Yeah, regarding the laptops, I'm sure I can think if we're going to require directors to use a laptop, then I think we have to supply them with a laptop. Just in principle, you can't really require a director to bring their laptop to a meeting or have a laptop ready to fully participate in the meeting, but say, and by the way, we don't have a laptop for you. You have to go buy your own. And again, for personally, I'm sure I could find something to bring that I could show Zoom on, but just as a principle, it seems little not supplying the laptops. I understand the budget implications, but that to me seems a little.
Well, especially if someone doesn't have a laptop. I have two, I don't personally don't have this issue. So I think, yes, I think the general manager needs to do a survey of directors, who may not have a laptop or feel strongly about not using theirs.
Well, and I'm not going to be on the board for that much longer. Neither is Director Sharis-Watt. There might be new directors that have a different opinion. So I think we probably need a policy about laptops. Is that requirement for getting on the board? You got to have to have a laptop, or I think it's something to seriously consider. It's not, I think, just a throwaway issue. And by the way, you could use a tablet. It doesn't have to be a laptop, because all you need to do is look at Zoom. It doesn't have to be a very
True,
high device.
Mhm.
true. Okay. Excuse me, sorry. So, I mean, I don't see here a real action item, to be honest. I'm not sure I'm missing something. You have recommendations. So the first, go ahead, General Manager Constantine, why don't you lead us through your 6 recommendations, and maybe let's just have a really quick one, go through that.
Well, Madam President, I was going to suggest a couple of target dates for a practice meeting where we can discuss this further at the practice meeting at the same time. And that would be Thursday, September 29, or Thursday, October 6, as possible dates.
Okay.
And then we can discuss these matters in a little more detail. And after there's been a lot of opinions expressed, and maybe with a little time to think about them, we can have a better discussion. And I also think the suggestion of having a few light items on the agenda, which I think Director Sheriff Swat suggests is a good idea too. That would give us an opportunity to do some housekeeping with items that we can move out of the way rather quickly. So if either of those 2 dates, we can work on those 2 dates if you are available.
And I can tell you that works for me, but I think probably the best thing to do would be just survey, if anyone has an objection to either of those 2 dates right now, and it'd be great to say that now. And I think the general manager could confirm that by email.
Or you can send me an email tomorrow with that, if either of those dates work or don't work. You
Okay.
might consult your calendars, and you maybe aren't able to answer that immediately.
Mhm.
You can just send me a quick email tomorrow. Does that work for everybody?
It works for me.
So far, it worked for me. So.
Okay.
Why don't you send us an email with those dates and then we'll respond to that?
Okay.
All right.
That.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Scheich, for your assistance and your presence here today. So that is the end of this item and discussion. And we're now going to the next item on our
Very good.
board.
I'm gonna head off and thank you.
Yes.
Cheers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our board is the subject of our office relocation, and we're going to review. I'm sure that it won't be completely extensive because there's always something we may have forgotten, but a pretty good review of efforts to look at other locations. We're going to be getting an updated summary chart from Mr. Myers, the architect we had hired to look at some available options, and consider utilizing a commercial real estate broker, something we haven't done to date, to potentially help us as we continue to, we're just, I think, trying to be extremely, responsible, diligent, and thorough in our efforts to examine options. So our general manager will be presenting this item. Oh no, and he appears to be frozen. Hold on. There you are, Tony.
What could go wrong with technology?
Yeah.
All right. So did you hear your intro?
I didn't. I hope it was a good one.
Well, I kind of teed up the item before us. So why don't you go ahead and present that to us?
Okay. And also I was trying to contact Mr. Myers here because he's been waiting patiently. And
Oh, probably.
there he is. So
There he is. Okay. Welcome back, Mr. Myers.
so let me give a quick introduction, and then we'll give Mr. Myers the floor. And I think he has a creative and meaty discussion on this topic and some new data for the board to consider. Basically, starting with that on the background, I've included quite a few attachments to this item that provide background to the board. 2 letters from the Arlington Church that have been previously presented to the board. The Swat Myers presentation that was at the July 13 meeting, and also the July 13 PowerPoint presentation. So let me just review that February presentation of the board because it covers the board's efforts to look at several locations. And I'll mention these locations The first one was the Narcy Restaurant Building. The second one was the county parking lot at Covington and Ardmore. Then there was the East Bay Mud District property. There was 268 Arlington Avenue. There was a residential site that was considered. 303 Arlington Avenue also was considered. And then the community center and district property were reviewed and led to Mr. Myers's report to the board, where he summarized several pros and cons for each of those options. The Arlington Church, of course, responded that saying that their portion of the north lot of the parking lot is not for sale, lease, or swap arrangement. And they sent a letter to the editor stating that. And they've also sent a second letter further emphasizing their position. And after Mr. Myers' presentation, I would like to just put forward the idea of utilizing the possibility of a commercial real estate broker to assist the board in this process. The board doesn't have to make that decision tonight. It'd be good to have some feedback on that, whether you think that's a potential idea and worth considering. So with that, I'd like, with the president's approval, turn this over to Mr. Myers.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, should I start?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, directors, for having me back. Is it possible to have Anna Chow, who's with me tonight, actually show the drawings?
Yes, she would. If she's signed in as an attendee, then our clerk can promote her to participant, and she can give her permission to share her screen.
Okay, and one other question. Just like you guys are being very diligent and thorough and wanting to look at all the options, after I sent this, essentially a diagram trying to very simply outline what we saw as different options on that site, including several that we presented the last time we met. I did another one that is a variation on one of these, and I'm wondering if that would be okay to show that after we showed the first six.
Yes. So you said you have another option to present in addition to the ones that were here. I think that's fine.
It's not radically different, but there are a couple of important, I think, differences to it.
Okay.
Okay. Anna, could you put up the?
I'm still disabled in terms of screen sharing.
Oh, let's see. You're a panelist.
You have to maybe give her permission to share her screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So you may either have to go into the share screen area or under participant. I'm not sure.
I have multiple participants, host and panelists.
There she goes. She's starting to share screen. Okay.
Okay. So I'm assuming everybody can see that.
I can. I think so.
Great. Okay. Well, Tony said to make this as simple, graphically as possible. So happy to answer any questions and get into a lengthier discussion about any of these. But the first the first drawing that's up there is just showing the existing site, and we used a dashed red line to indicate the approximate property line between the church's property on the left and the district's property on the right. It's a one-way, as you all know, it's a one-way drive going from Kensington, through the parking area. So it's a little hard to say exactly how many parking spaces are on one side or the other because some of them straddle it. But there's approximately 13 to 14 spaces on the church side. And I think we got a different number up here, but there's either 25 or 26, depending on how you count it, on the district side. There are a total of 39 spaces. So whether it's 14 and 25 or 13 and 26, that's kind of where the existing spaces are. Okay, if we go down, the first couple of options are exactly what the last time we met. This first option was placing a modular building. It's the modular building that exists right now, and there's a proposal to purchase it. This would be the module that the Kensington Police Department would be moving into temporarily. And so we used that diagram that we were sent. We did not generate that diagram. And you may remember, and I do think this is important, depending on who's looking at what scheme, the drawing that we had been sent with this, when you put it to scale to a site, was actually not drawn at the correct scale. It's actually needs, if you're actually using that drawing, it needs to be blown up a bit, because the overall dimensions, as we understand it, of the module are 60 feet by 48 feet. And that's what you're looking at to scale on these drawings, is 60 by 48. And I'm only saying that because I think, there have been some other diagrams floating around that look like this, but they're actually not the correct size relative to the scale of the drawing that you're looking at. So this first one, was just a quick scheme to say, if you place the building kind of back on the church's property in that corner, you could have a drive-through, an access from Arlmont into the police department. You could have a separate access for other, general public parking, church parking, coming from from Kensington. And in this particular scenario, there was a total of 29 Smithsfield Gate, and 22 were, accessed, from Kensington. The second one, which was, probably the one I thought of, the ones we had studied previously, seemed to work the best, was placing the building somewhat in the middle, kind of right in the middle of the property line, with 7 patrol secure parking spaces accessed from Arlmont, and a very similar 22 spaces from Kensington. And I will say, without, again, getting into a great amount of detail, these drawings all look flat when you view them. There's actually quite a slope across the site, not only going back up the hill, but actually going from Kensington to Arlmont. And although these are very preliminary diagrams, we did try to take the slopes into account. Some of these drawings, not these diagrams, but the ones we showed you previously and in the report, we had specific grades to make sure, we could even get handicap accessibility. And again, although they're very preliminary, we do think they're workable. So this was the second one we showed. We talked about a third one, which is the next one. We moved that up. And I just threw it on here for discussion purposes. And that would be, and I think we were discussing something like this at the end of the meeting. So we called this one option 3, where you only place the module or the modular building on the district side. You did not use the church's property, with however many spaces are on that site. We left on this diagram, we just left the parking the way it is semi laid out or striped on the site right now. Obviously, if you're only coming in from Arlmont, you'd have to rework it so that you could drive in and out. But this layout, you'd be able to place the modular on relatively flat land. There'd be a little bit of cutting into the hill, but not a lot. It's the beginning of that hill, but there would be a small amount of excavation. And we think as much as maybe 10 spaces on the other side, although in this layout, it's very difficult to separate the police parking, secure parking from any general district parking or visitor parking or general public parking. But it can be done only on the district's property. I then did a couple of alternatives just to say I did them, where I said, if you actually cut into the hill and maybe reconsidered a modular building and just designed a new building that you actually fit on the site, you'd probably do it differently. About it, but from a cost perspective, obviously you'd be building a new building as opposed to placing a already constructed modular building. But I thought it was at least worth looking at what would that mean. If you did that, you probably could, and of course build into the hill. You could come close to achieving the number of parking spaces that currently exist on that site. But in this layout, I'm designating any secure parking. I'm just saying what would be the most you could get on a site like this if you left it open the way it is now from one end to another. And I thought it was sort of interesting to see what that might look like. The next one, which is very similar to that, says if you did do a building similar to that, but you didn't use the church's property, what would that look like? And in this one, you could, on additional parking spaces, you could secure the 7 patrol cars, which was the program number we had talked about. To get to those 7 patrol cars, you are driving through the general public or visitor parking area as opposed to having its own separated entrance. But generally speaking, this looks like something that could be made to work. And after this, and this is on the drawing that was sent to you. And we didn't really have time, because I just came up with it, to actually redo that entire chart, squeeze it in. So we're just going to show it separately. And, you could do something like this. It's similar to, one of those previous schemes, probably similar to 3 and 4 in a way. This would use the modular building. It would mean a bigger cut into that hill, which, all of this would be pending a geotechnical report that would have to be done. But, I think you could cut it using the modular building, create a situation where you could get both secure parking on this site, and you could, get, 5, maybe more parking spaces with some study coming in off of Kensington. The hill is there. Buildings get cut into hills all the time. They do require retaining walls. There's a couple of trees there that might be able to save the other 2 with some work. But a scheme like this does seem to be feasible, and again, only utilizing the district's property. And there certainly are all sorts of variations on these schemes if one wanted to pursue them and study them further. It's a tricky site in the sense that there's cross slopes in both directions. Obviously, you'd need to meet handicap accessibility into the building, handicap parking. secure parking. So, there's a lot of stuff going on in a relatively small amount of area, is feasible. So this was the additional diagram I did. And, I think it's a pretty good representation as a group of just different ways you could approach the site, either jointly using the entire one or only using the district's property. And maybe I'll just leave it at that and answer any specific questions you have about any design or,
Okay. I see Director Natoli's hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. My question is, when you're talking about going into the hillside, where's the community center? Because there's a flat area outside the community center. Are you cutting into the hillside that would impact that flat area?
Well, I think you would cut into the sloped part and, up to the part where it becomes flat, but not really in.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, if you were, again, I'm quite sure the budget does not allow this, but just to hear myself say it as an architect, if you were actually building this as a new building, I mean, this is a kind of site where you could build into that hill and do a green roof, for example, that actually extended the flat area up above. I mean, those things would be possible if you were starting from scratch. If you're utilizing an existing building, which obviously is a project and, makes a lot of sense. It's hard to do that, I think, because that building was clearly not designed to take an additional load, on the roof.
Right. Thank you.
Director Saraswat.
Thank you so much for this. When you look at option 4 or 4A, I'm wondering if you could do a rough ballpark for us. When we renovated the community center, which is a 4,500 square, it's a bit bigger, clearly, than what we're talking about, but it's also essentially just a shell without, much going on. And we were told that to rebuild that today would be between $3 and $5 million. So it seems to me that the cost of getting these parking spaces in option 4 it's kind of like $200,000 a parking space. I don't know what your guesstimate would be right now for a building of this size. Minus all the geotechnical and everything.
Yeah.
But
I mean, even if the world wasn't spiraling with inflation and, I would do you all a disservice quoting some price on a diagram like this. I mean, there are so many factors, particularly on this site, and particularly in this area, just given the, geological issues that you're going to have to take a look at. But, generally speaking, new buildings like this and, maybe add to them, some special excavation and retaining walls. It is not surprising to be in the area of probably at least $1,500 a square foot today, $1,200 to $1,500. I mean, you wouldn't be talking about numbers that high many years ago, but today, common number to hear on a public building. So, you could multiply that times the square footage. The parking part of it, you could probably pretty much follow grade there. I don't think the parking per se would be, an excessively, expensive beyond normal parking for that area. But the building would not be an inexpensive building. And you would need to build it to, not to build it to essential facility standards, but I think that most public agencies would go ahead and just build this to the 1.5, 1.5 times normal structural requirements as an essential facility. So, it would be in that ballpark of cost without having designed it.
Vice President Logan?
Yes, George, and I also really thank you for this additional work on this option 4A, whatever, was kind of where I was liking when you were last here, but as I counted, then you pretty much would be losing 12 spaces, parking spaces. So do you foresee that perhaps in other areas of the district property right next to this, like I know that you had put in additional parking into the near the annex area, whatever. I would love to see us be able to at least replace most of this parking, even though, like, luckily, I'm glad to see it's only 12 spaces. Do you think we can also add some more spaces around that too, not right in the parking lot area?
You mean add additional public parking that would serve the community center?
Exactly. Yeah, because especially since to try to get some of those spaces back, the people are used to using that entire parking lot, so we're losing 12 of ours, and if there's overflow, we usually would go on beyond that. But I'd like to see if we can get some more spaces elsewhere within on Kensington there that I think a couple of areas look like they might be able to create some diagonal parking.
Right. I agree with you. I think there's probably some opportunities along Kensington to pick up some spaces that would probably be relatively inexpensive compared to trying to build a new parking lot somewhere.
And when when you say Kensington, you mean Kensington Park Road?
Yes.
Yeah. I meant Kensington
I just
Park
want
Road.
other people to know.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Yeah.
And it's possible that we could work with the county to get some spots along Arlemont, just a little bit near there, because it's quite wide there, and it lines along Arlemont Drive.
Yeah, but I do want to point out that option 4 and 4A and getting that many spaces to do that, I created a new building. I mean, I cheated in the sense that I didn't use the modular, but I thought it was at least worth it for you to see. Could you, what could you pick up additionally if parking was a premium? Because you can pick up the parking, but it forces you. And if you could put up 5 again, 5 doesn't give you 21 spaces, it gives you 12. I think it'd be really hard pressed to get a whole lot more than that. So whatever the differential in cost would be between the buildings, and I think there would be quite a differential, you would, if you were looking at it, if you were doing it for the sake of added parking, you'd then be looking at, for essentially the addition of 9 parking spaces. And I think those would, without doing the math, those would be pretty expensive parking spaces.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I put my hand up again. Is that all right? I'll just talk.
Sure.
I just wanted to say that I don't think we should gauge it like that. What we're looking here, there was really reducing a lot of the parking spaces. Here I see 5 spaces. More spaces available for the park and the library, and I would hate to be left with that. As much as it would hurt me and whatever, another design, and I think I'd asked this too when the last time you spoke, is if we may just have to go to a different dimension, different same square footage building, but laid out differently, which does mean doing it twice, but it's still the cost of the building is still puts us in a realm I think that we can work with. And the temporary building that we're working on right now we just intended it to be temporary. If we could reuse it, it'd be great, but that's I don't think in a lot of spaces. And then we'd have to find them somewhere.
I'd like to ask, because I had sort of suggested the potentially of like looking into the hillside. And when you show that there's two things I'd like to say. One is, aren't there other modular structures that could be employed that would be, you know, different than building a whole new building? That wouldn't be the modular we're going in temporarily. That could be a sort of in-between option where like steel metal container types are very kind of cool looking. So are there other modular options we could look at using the hillside?
Well, I mean, the answer is yes. If you're talking about a modular that's built in a factory, you know, then your requirements on that are, you know, there's many companies that actually can, your requirement, your limitation is on the width of the modular because you've got to take it on public roads. And there's a bunch of different, you know, issues, but to make a long story short, you're probably somewhere between 14 and 15 feet wide being the maximum. And therefore, you know, you would have to look at, are you going to put 2 by 2 side by side, which would be 28 to 30 feet. And that probably could be made to work, and it could probably look something like even these diagrams 4 and 4A. But even modular construction today is, there's not as much savings on a custom modular, because this would be a one-off custom modular. Then it would be less expensive than new construction, but it would be, I'm quite sure, significantly purchasing and moving the existing modular for. But you would be able to manipulate the shape of it.
I'm sorry, I missed the one thing you said about the comparison with the existing modular that we're currently renovating. What did you say about that?
Well, I think I think what I was trying to say is that building a new construction modular that is, you're only building one, it's, I call it a one of a kind, would be significantly, I think probably significantly more expensive than the cost of the modular that's already constructed.
Okay, got it.
But I actually, my company has a modular line. It's called Simpatico. You can look it up. And we're building several of these now, both in California, and a couple of them are under construction in Nevada. And we work with a company that builds the modulars up in Seattle, they're in the northern Seattle, you know, area, and they ship them down here. So we've only used them for residential use, the custom residential. And I can tell you, they do take less time to build. Oh, Anna, you're so quick. Put that up, but
they're very attractive.
Yeah, they're very attractive. One of them's in Emeryville, that one there that was built by Anna. I didn't mean to advertise our bunch.
Which one is in Emeryville?
This one right here. It's actually around the corner from our office. But so, I mean, I'm speaking with a little bit of experience of building modulars, and you know, there's a difference between the kind of modulars that are being built, for example, out in Vallejo now at the old Blue Homes factory out there. Rick Holiday is, you know, the guy who owns that.
Yeah, I should let you know that his sister is a Kensington resident.
Oh, okay. Well,
and my neighbor.
Rick's an old friend of mine, and he's a great guy, and they do great work. But most of the work they do there is much more of an assembly line, you know, many units. And, you know, it's that type of modular that you can really keep the cost down. When you're doing a one of a kind, you're basically creating a prototype. And I don't think it would be a lot different. I'm not trying to talk anybody out of doing a modular, public building. I think it'd be fun and cool to do, but it probably won't exceed in place new construction, but it'll probably come close to it. There's not going to be as much savings as maybe one thinks using the term modular.
I think one other thing I would just like to throw out there is that if we continue to explore this option, because the old annex building is so close to this site, we could have a bit of a rethinking about, because I find it just really a shame that asset continues to stay, unused. And I understand that there's concern around the police being there, but there are other functions that wouldn't involve, police cars up there and wouldn't involve police officers there, 24/7. If it continues to, that's a concern of residents, but that space, continues to be currently unused. And so now if we are examining this option, there may be some thought about how we could shrink this a little bit and make use of that other space. So that requires a kind of whole nother potentially rethinking about what might or might not make sense. But I guess I would just, given the parking issue, which I think, is the concern that many people have, and of course, that Director Shara-Swat.
I don't mean to minimize anyone's concern, but the fact is that I feel that solely operating our design on the basis of how many parking spaces we can identify totally, with no regard to cost, is rather like decorating or doing your housing renovation around your Christmas tree. That lot is truthfully full, really full, probably 4 or 5 times a year. And I appreciate it's a community asset, but it's, there are other places to park. And I don't want to get inflammatory or anything, but the church has a parking lot on their property on the lower half that is usable on the weekend when the nursery schools are not renting it. There's lots of parking on Rincon. It's probably fairly disruptive to the residents there, but it happens all day during the week. And there's lots of parking on Arlington and Ardmore. So, I would certainly consider adding spaces, Armont and the Arlington. So, I just don't think that we should make, and then we're saying, let's put more cars up in our park. So, it's important to have access and parking, but I don't think that should be our driving force.
Vice President Logan.
Yeah, I just, the point I was making earlier as far as the parking, because though it was a drastic reduction down to 5, and I use that parking lot all the time when I would come to the library and use the park. That's the main one. I do worry about it, and I said I still am interested in, as far as, again, we're only speaking modulars, where if the shape of the modular were more conformed to the actual shape of the plot that we have. If you look at just between option 3, or sorry, just to say between 4 and 4A, you see quite a difference. And if you look between 3 and 4A, again, you're going from, you got quite a difference of number of parking there. I just want us to keep open mind that we might, it would be cost and would be doing it to twice, and I would not want to, as I said, but I don't think we should just consider only one thing. I think we should think of what would work best. We were just considering just the temporary as doing the temporary while we figure out what we're going to do on a more permanent basis. And this is what we're trying to figure. If we ultimately decide that we would get rid of more spaces and to save the money on using what we already done, I think that's also another factor. I don't want to lose sight of what the end result is going to look like and how it's going to operate.
Could you, Anne, or Anna, sorry, Anne or Anna, I'm sorry. Could you just go back a little bit so we could see all the options on that one page again? Yeah, okay, option 1 and 2 are really, unless anything changes, no longer really under, I mean, we've gotten a pretty.
Right, both of those, you know, when we first did that, we thought there was a possibility to use both sides of the site, and that's what those two drawings, you know, were based upon.
Right, and option 2 does preserve a lot of the community parking, which I know was the stated concern of the church, at least their stated concern was about preservation of parking. And unfortunately, that was the option that probably did best for that. Okay, I think unless there's any, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. I have to go see Director Deppie because he's not on my screen. All right, if there's any more discussion at the moment from the board, I think it might be a good time to open it to the public to have them weigh in, and also perhaps, you know, weigh in mostly, and we'll see if it's any other questions outstanding. The general manager of the fire district, Bill Hansel's with us. His hand is up. Bill, you should be able to unmute yourself and talk.
Thank you, President Hasai, and thank you for the presentation. I'm glad I'm able to just watch this. I just wanted to mention in terms of your references that the district recently a testing of the construction costs. The bids that went out for the public safety building, which is 5,900 square feet, the lowest bid was 5.5 million. So it's just you know, under $1,000 a square foot. That was the estimate that we were working with for the company for over a year. And we did have to do a comparison of what a new building would cost because of the Alquist Priolo Act. And that was dollars. And, you know, there, in that case, we obviously had the advantage of it being renovation and not requiring, you know, doing everything over again. But you should also be aware that 2 of the other bids came in $500,000 over at $6 million, and then 2 of them, the highest ones, came in at 6.5. So it's interesting to see all these variations, and it's I know fascinating, especially with my architecture background. And I appreciate George's interest in customizing the building to the site. That's ideally what you would do, but it's really fortuitous that you have the modular and would save to relocate that. I had the pleasure of walking through the other day and seeing how much work Chief Gencast and his crew have been able to do, and you know, it'd be a shame to kind of lose that asset in a way, especially given the cost of new construction, or even as George was saying, modulars, which save time but don't necessarily, other modulars or custom modulars don't necessarily save on dollars per square feet. And in my experience as an architect, I completely appreciate Director Sharaswat's comments about you know, being able to make parking spaces and not letting that you know, be the determining factor. So I just wanted to throw that in. So thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my screen has gone black. Oh, there it goes. Okay. And I'll go ahead to the next public comment is from Gail Feldman. And if you could take Bill Hansel's hand down and let Gail speak. Go ahead, Gail.
There.
You should, yep, you're unmuted now.
Okay, great. Well, probably I won't be able to get through everything I wanted to say on this item. But I do just look at I think it's very helpful to have the parking numbers spelled out, that even under the best scenario, option 4, you're getting only maybe at most additional 10 parking spaces out of a much more expensive project from what it sounds like. And I would certainly think that you could find 10 parking spaces between Kensington Road and the public right-of-ways. And so, you know, for the community to contemplate spending $5 million, which clearly your board doesn't have, for 10 parking spaces does really beg the question. And I really hope that the entire community can look at this and say, wow, you know, maybe the best solution isn't, again, relook at the options, you know, 1 and 2, possibly 3, but the best scenario would be to find a design that maximizes the number of parking spaces in the lot and then adds back the 17 spots that we'd be foregoing under option 1 or 2, finding those around the park and around the church area so that there's no total loss of spaces, but done in a much more cost-effective way. I am really concerned about this, and I really hope that the community is paying attention to what's going on this. The modular that you have been converting down in El Cerrito is quite large, and again, I think that needs to be looked at, how much square footage you actually really need for both administration and police. My understanding is that building is structurally set up so that you can break it down in sections. So, you know, that might be something to look at, is to really reevaluate what your space needs are going to be. And you'll need to do that anyway if you're going to hire a commercial real estate broker to help you look for other spaces. So you really need to know what you need. And so, you know, on that front, as far as, you know, the, I guess, recommendation from the general manager, which is to look at hiring a commercial real estate broker, you know, you really need to define what it is that you want that broker to do, if that's what you're going to do, because I believe that the district has really scoured the community, and we know there's very little commercial real estate available. So, you know, what are you talking about? Are you talking about things that are available now, things that maybe somebody's thinking they're going to put on the market in 6 months? But again, those are the kinds of things I would hope that you would ask and really define before, you know, we move forward. But I hope the community, again, looks at these parking numbers and takes into, you know, consideration for trying to find another 10 to 15 spaces. Thank you.
Okay. Delk, you're next.
Am I on?
You should be.
All right. 2 simple questions. In option 4A, what happens if you switch to the north with the open space to the south? Would you gain any public parking spaces? All right. Number 2 is, it seems that all of these buildings are 1-story buildings that you're gonna build, cut out a huge area of ground to put them in. And why not build 2-story buildings? A 2-story building. For example, the administrative offices could be accessed from the Oval up at the community center, and the police department more from down at the secure parking lot. And the public parking lot could come in from the north. Not a prepared speech, but that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I would actually like George, if he's willing to answer or think about any of those things. I had a thought about a 2-story too, but I certainly don't want to interfere with the view from our beautiful community center. But I could imagine there could be a way to play with the elevation. So maybe you could answer those 2 parking.
Well, let me answer the 2-story one first, because I understood that one. I'm probably going to need some clarification on the second or the first question. The 2-story, I mean, clearly you could do a 2-story building. Okay. I mean, programmatically, you know, I'm not sure who would be on one floor, what uses would be, but you could do that. But I think the problem you have here is this building actually is a relatively small building. It's approximately 3,000 square feet. I mean, that's the size of the modular. 50.
2,800, no?
I mean, it's actually less than that, 48 by, what does that come out? It's a little less than 3,000.
I think it's like 2,800.
Yeah.
2880, if I recall.
And that's a relatively small footprint. If you go 2 stories, you're going to need at a minimum well, probably the minimum would also be the maximum, 2 stairs and an elevator, okay, to meet all of current codes, because you'd be talking about a new building. You know, when you add up the square footage on that, and
Yeah,
you'd have to count it on both floors, you'd be adding 1,400. I've done this a lot on
yeah. Yeah,
it comes up. It's a good question, but you're adding about 1,400 to 1,500 square feet.
Yeah.
Now, if this was a 20,000, 30,000 square foot building, you know, I mean, it's still a big number and there's an expense, but as a percentage, you know, it's somewhat understandable. But in this case, you'd be essentially adding 50% more square footage to the size of the building. And I think just economically, I mean, you could do it, but you'd be spending a lot, say, you know, your footprint going 2 stories. Now, on this,
great explanation. That says a lot.
now on this, the first question, I'm not quite sure if I understood it. Do you mean move the building closer to
No,
the
I think what she's saying, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, is to flip where you have the secure parking to the north. Oh, I don't actually, Delk, why don't you explain? Because I'm not sure I do understand. I thought I did.
Am I still on?
Yes.
All right. No, just looking at it, could you find parking spaces for 7 police cars in a secure lot with which they would enter from Kensington Road, and then the space would be closed off at some point, and you would, for the public parking, you would enter from Arlemont. The church would still allow Kensington to drive there.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Well, the answer is yes, you could do that, but you would need the church. I mean, you would need the church, you know, parking
Well,
area in order to access it.
I think if you don't piss the church off royally, they would still allow you to drive cars there because it is a community church.
Well, what you're saying basically would just be that people would have the right, as they do now, to drive through either space to get to other spaces. And so you're sort of
No.
suggesting that public parking would be accessed through Arlemont, and they would be on the other side of where the dark line is drawn now.
Yes, and those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces along Arlington could be also for public parking, with the secured parking somehow separated from there between the east and the west. If you know, maybe I'll
I see what you're saying, but I think the hard part would be the secure parking, because you know, I don't know how you would do a gate to turn into those spots.
No, the secure gate is along Kensington Road. All right. And then there's another completely closed off area. You could also move the pink building a little bit to the north and you get a couple more parking spaces beside it. But I'm just saying, think about flipping that. If in fact parking space is going to be something that we want to consider, and we want to be able to library to have access.
Yeah, 4A. I think you're talking more about 4A, correct?
4A.
Yeah, more looking at 4A. Okay.
All right.
And I would also just like to say that regardless of what, if the public spaces, the more open public spaces are left to the north side of the lot off of Arlemont, it would be nice to have a sidewalk that went, on that west side of Arlington Avenue to get people to the library, because I believe right now there is no sidewalk there. That, there would be no way to go through there because there'd be a secure gate or
I
something.
could just make one other comment. In 4A, you also, just to the right of the red line, you've got some green space there, which you don't need for the 7 police cars, but that's also space that might be able to be used for public parking if you just try to rethink. How that's
Thank you.
I think, these are very diagrammatic, and you're right, probably with some study, there might be another space or two you could get out of here. But I think you'd be only talking about maybe 1 or 2 additional spaces in that layout. But all of these additional schemes that we were showing that were done from the previous presentation were based upon the assumption that the church's parking was not, or showed what would happen if you did drive through. But these were trying to look at what would happen if you could only build on the district's property. So.
Okay, there's 2 more public comment, but I saw that Director Sheriff Watt's hand went up, so I'll give you a chance and then we'll go back to public comment.
I just wanted to note for both maybe George and Tony, as we go forward, there currently is, it's prohibited to turn up onto Arlemont Drive between the hours of 2 and 3 during the week.
To turn right?
Yes, to turn. So anyone wanting to access those 13 space would need to make a loop possibly from Cowper up
Or
to Highland and down Arlemont. So that's just a note during that time of the day that would require a change of traffic control.
And it's just 2 to 3 and not in the morning as well?
Is that still
It might be between 8 and 9 and 2 to 3, but definitely between 2.
Is that still the issue? Because now there's that, you can no longer enter Hilltop from the back.
But the teachers can, and people, they don't want anybody turning that way, I don't think.
Okay.
And kids can be picked up that way. That's the 2 to 3 in the afternoon. So they don't want anyone driving up Arlemont when kids are trying to cross from Highland. And
I think that, and before school, the kids can enter there. They lock the gate after no more entry, but I think for kids to be able to go in there, they could do that. All right, let me get back to public comment because there were Andra Duggan should be able to go next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Our open space is what makes Kensington so special. Our trees, our views, our fresh air. We're so lucky to live here. I am saddened and dismayed that you are contemplating the loss of parking so that people can use the park, the views, the trees cutting into that hillside. Oh yeah, just a few more trees. Oh my God, it just really burns me. Everybody, with their toddlers, it's really an important lot. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's how little space is required to run an enterprise. In the light of the new 1 PSB plan, which was presented by Jim Watt, KPFD candidate for November, to the fire board, I'm just really dismayed that the board is just moving ahead blindly with this plan to else. 840 people signed the Save Kensington's Future petition, asking you to pause, asking you to reconsider. We now put 6 candidates on the ballot who will look again at placing the police in the PSB or PSB with a little bit of space down the street on the Arlington, which is available and which will protect taxpayers' pocketbooks for the future. And I just wanted to say, please don't put it in the church, in the parking lot. Please don't use any part of the park. Please change your direction. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Knight is next up.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, my comments are a little similar to Cassandra's. I feel that there is a bigger picture here that's being ignored, and that parking lot is a community asset, that it is used by any number of organizations and individuals for activities there in that general area. In the community center, there are 3 schools in the church across the street. There is the library, there is the playing field, there is the kid playground there and the picnic area. People use this parking lot as a center for parking when they attend these various venues. And I'm surprised at the board. The board knows very well that how politically on the park itself, to use the annex building and to use building E on the park property, but immediately next door, the parking area which services it, you're quite willing to block off and take off major parking that services this area. I don't feel like George Myers has properly taken this into account. And I think if you're serious about placing a police station there, that at a minimum, Rochelle just sort of brushes aside the fact that she says that this area isn't used that much. She doesn't know that. She hasn't taken a survey, but what needs to be done? It needs to be done in concert, George, with your plans. So number one, I think that this is inappropriate in the first place, that once the community finds out and community parking lot is being taken over by the police station, I think there will be a blowback, just like there was for the annex and building E. Secondly, I don't feel there's been a proper assessment of the south of library property, an enormous piece of real estate, which looks to me like it should be studied. George, you were asked to do a limited view of just certain areas, but not that in the corner that's being ignored. So there you go.
Thank you. And please continue to address your comments to the board. Thank you. Dave Spath, you're up next, and that is the last comment I see, and that will be the last public comment. Dave Spath.
Thank you, Sylvia. Dave Spath. A couple points. Mr. Meyer has already, I think, pretty clearly indicated that it would be too expensive regardless of the parking issues. Given building a new building at $1,500 a square foot would seem to be far too costly. So it seems that you have 2 options: the modular that you already apparently are going to own, which is 3. And I will reiterate what Anthony just said, and that is that I think you need to at least cost out what it would take to build in south of the library. I know that you have discounted that, but I don't think there has been any real true effort to cost it out. I would suggest that you ask Mr. Meyer to look at that. He's not been asked to look at that. I think he should be given the opportunity to look at how a modular facility would work in that space, because that to me is the only other option you have. Having a commercial real estate agent have to buy it, or you could incur eminent domain, but you still have to pay for it. You're going to have to buy a building, you have to tear it down, and then put something on it that's seismically acceptable. Because you got to recognize, even if you're building a new building, it has to meet essential services requirements for seismic protection. And you don't even know if there's a possible fault line either in the parking lot here or even in south of the library property or anywhere in Kensington, because we're all within the earthquake hazard zone. So I think I would certainly recommend that you take a look at that south of the library parking, that area. Have Mr. Meyer look and see what it would look like from an architectural standpoint, and possibly cost that out. And thank you again.
Thank you. Director Sharis Watt, if you have, I wasn't sure if your hair is new or not.
Couple comments. For response to the speakers. First, the hillside that is above the building depicted in 4 and 4A, that hillside is scrub. It's really not trees. Unfortunately, a few years ago, it was on fire. It's hillside. It's scrub. It's nothing that needs preserving. I'm pretty aware of Jim Watt's plans, and even more so, I'm aware of the 5 years that Director Deppy and I have spent on looking at options around Kensington. And frankly, anyone running for office ought to know that the mission, unfortunately, of this board is not to preserve parking. It's to provide police services, community recreation, and solid waste. And while parking is lovely and nice, and I'm pretty aware of what goes on in that parking lot, as I've had a child at Hilltop continuously for the last 18 years, and I've had a child in the Arlington Community Church nursery schools. So while I'm a bit confused about the preservation of parking at the loss of police, we definitely, and I would continue to advocate that the board looks at all options around Kensington in the hopes that we will find a unicorn. But the fact is that we've been looking at this for quite a while. And if you don't think police services are important, I'll tell you yesterday afternoon what they did at Hilltop, which was an active shooter drill, where our police went through the entire campus to make sure that in the event of the unthinkable, they were prepared. If that is less important than parking 4 or 5 times for a community event, you lost me. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, let me think if there's any more questions that anyone else might have on the board. I think, I guess, we have to make some decisions about how we move forward. This is all very just, preliminary.
No, it's not.
Excuse me, no one else should be speaking at this point other than the board members. So I would appreciate the clerk would make sure that no other participants are speaking. Thank you. So we are examining options, and we have, unless the church would open up discussions on most likely option 2, which preserves the most parking, and for the community, of course, involving their land as well, then, that's always still, we're not too far down the road for that not to happen. I don't know whether general manager, a board member, or Mr. Myers wants to make a suggestion about like what they might think we need to do next. I think there's lots of options to cost out. There is not an assumption, by the way, I'm not sure who said that we are going to own the modulars that we're currently renting in El Cerrito. That is certainly a good possibility or a possibility, but there is no expectation or predetermination that we are going to buy that building yet. So I guess the other question is, if I understand what Mr. Myers has said, is that the option of a custom cost savings, but potentially not enough. And I think the point about, what we really, what we need, I mean, the modular at 2,800 square feet is one option, but then there is a smaller modular, there's a modular plus potentially putting certain functions or aspects in the annex. There is the option of looking for other space in Kensington for certain functions. And so I think this is, there are lots of possibilities if we continue to stay open, flexible, and creative about what we actually need or could do with. So I don't know if anyone has a suggestion about how to proceed. It's just kind of a lot of things available to us.
Would you mind if I just made a couple of quick comments?
Not at all.
Okay, so obviously my role in this is to study, whatever sites you've asked, and I've tried to do that. These studies here are just they are a dire point to try to give all those that are considering this a better idea of what fits or doesn't fit on the site. Any one of these, if you proceeded with it, would need to get blown up. A lot of more detailed study, and probably it could be that you lose a space here, you gain a space, but I think they're generally pretty representative of the potential site capacity here. But having studied these, I just want to say, option 2 is if you were able to, put all of that land together and use it, I think clearly would, I mean, not that it's perfect, there's some issues with it, but I think it's clearly just because it stays as far away from, excavating into that hill. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but it's relatively minor. It's positioned fairly well, and it ends up actually giving you and the community the most parking spaces of any of the other schemes, if you're able to do that. If you opted to one of the other schemes that only utilize the district land, the available spaces to probably both the church and the public are really, up with probably about 13 or 14 spaces only. Whereas in option 2, even though it's less than the 39 maybe total spaces that are there now, there are 22 spaces. There's actually more spaces available than what would be available to the church should, a project be built only on the district land. So I hope that part is clear. If you did only build on the district land, I think the two probably cost-effective designs are option 3 or this new one, option 5 I put in. Option 5, I think, Anna, can you move that over just a minute? I think it's clearly a better layout because it secures the parking and, it's a better utilization of land. That the building itself is the same. The excavation, probably the preparation to build that is going to be a bit more than option 3, but you probably end up with a better, overall product, if you went in in that direction, which is why, I thought it was important to, put that in front of you. But I think those are really the, the opportunities here. And, I mean, obviously there's pros and cons to, many of these, different studies, but I think as an overview, I think, that this hopefully, gives you kind of a general idea of what the capacity of this site is.
I have a question about the 7 spaces. That is just for patrol cars and does not include, like, for example, a personal, like anyone's personal car coming to work?
It's my understanding that that it does that would not include a personal car. That is just the patrol cars.
And I don't know whether the general manager can answer this question. Do you know how many of the officers take their cars currently back and forth per our policy as commuter cars?
I don't know. We can find out though and let you know.
So George, what you just said, I mean, I agree. Option 2 is the best for the community if, as was stated by the church, that parking was their overall concern, and it would be a sharing of the lots as it currently is in a different way, in a different format with different uses. But it would be basically, as it is now, a seamless, it's a fairly seamless lot. I mean, the secure parking is, also different, but it would be for the benefit of the community to have the easy access. But I wish and hope that the church might still consider that. If not, you believe that option 5, as far as the use of the site, if I'm paraphrasing right, the use of the site and the cost is the best on option 5. Is that correct? After option 2?
Well, I think option 5 is the best layout. I mean, it gives you the potential for the best layout. I think it would be more expensive than option 3 just because it's pushed into the hill further. The building itself would essentially be the same, but you'd have a bigger retaining. You'd spend more money, and preparing the site to place the module because you're digging deeper into the hill. And obviously, if you proceed, I mean, my recommendation would be if the district does decide to proceed with a scheme that is only on the district side and somewhat similar to maybe 5 or 3, I think you'd want to study both of these much closer and run some costs on them so you knew what the difference would be. My personal opinion looking at it is that although 5 would be more expensive, I would probably recommend that added expense pays for itself just by allowing you a better layout, which is kind of, you're spending, whatever money you spend, you're spending to ultimately end up with a product that's going to serve you well into the future. And I think you'd want the layout to be as good as it, could be, which is why I think, option 5 is just, is preferable.
Director Shara-Swat.
I'm going to ask if it's possible to do some pricing out on option 5. Oh, I can see your point now. I was trying to find why option 5 was going to be better than option 3. With option 3, there's we could close off the 5 spaces closest to the building, right? Could that be a secured parking? But we'd only get 5 spaces that way.
And you'd have to have a way into the building itself.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's quite small. There we go. Okay.
Just to be clear, when we were looking at that on 3, the effort was to try to pull the build possible. And as you can see with all of these, if you do that and you bring it down to where the land is more level, the building sort of blocks any continuity back and forth. So, you can't get it's hard to get a separate secure parking on one side of it and other parking on the other side of it because
Got it. Okay.
it's so narrow. The reason 5 lays out better is we then said, okay, so if you did push the building further into the hill, which means excavating farther, that actually is what allows you to get around it so that you would end up with secure on the other side. But you would have to do something like this to accomplish that. I think it's a better layout. I think it would be the right direction to go between the two, but that's the real difference between the two.
You know, I also wonder if it's possible to reduce the absolute number of secure parking spaces, that if, you know, I don't know enough of the detail for every single car and the use and, you know, why all of them have to be on one site. Perhaps 5 could be there and 2 here to talk about that. I don't know. Director Sharis-Watt.
No, I was mostly done. I'm hoping that we could get this priced out. I mean, I think it's clear. I agree with what George has said. Option 2 makes the most sense for the community, for us, if this is the site that we need to be at. And I hope that we could reach some kind of discussion that would be the understanding of the best benefit to the entire community. I think it's also the safest option, option 2, which has less traffic. But I think that I think we should continue to price out maybe option 5. And I really appreciate that George has done all this work. I mean, I think otherwise, if we're not getting anywhere, perhaps we have to go, you know, to the community, and Director Deppie and I can again present everything that we have looked at and why we have ended up here and what the options are and what it will cost to in tax dollars and you know.
Yeah, that you just unmuted. Okay. So the proposal would be for, it sounds to me like the proposal that Director Sharis-Watt is making is that we continue to express our openness to the church, that we, you know, would like to discuss option 2, and we remain open to that. In the meantime, pricing option 5. Does any other director want to make other requests or, you know, I guess the option with options 4 and 4A, maybe that would also be worth pricing out, like a modular possibility. Director Logan,
Well,
Vice President Logan?
because I had been focusing on 4A preferably before, and again, the assumption is always just on a different shaped modular. You know, I mean, never a new build has been considered for any of this. I think, and I would like to consider. I think there's a certain compromise in it, but the pricing is important. I mean, we've renovated a modular, but we haven't purchased this modular yet. We just, in a sense, we have the cost of again changing one modular. I would be curious as what the comparison of the two, where to getting again, in a sense, making a new getting another modular of a different shape, and what that would cost spaces. But I am curious because I kind of like aspects. I like parts of 4A. Like I said, I think it's just working a little better with the spaces available, and I appreciate that 5. I mean, in many ways, it's using something that we've already done the work on, and so I do like some look at 4A, but if you know, unless it's just the price between another modular is just too much. I mean, the modular we have, the one that's being renovated, it's 4, you know. It's 4. It breaks down. I mean, we can, they can break down into different dimensions. So
I think it would be helpful to get those cost estimates because I think it would help everybody see some of that. I mean, it's never going to be, perfect at this point. We're still early in thinking, but getting some estimates would help people see those costs, I think. And, I don't know if there's openness to thinking about the annex site in order to shrink the footprint of the building at all. Director Sheriff-Watt.
Well, now is, if we can put everyone in this, 2,800 square feet or 2,500 square feet or something, then we've got the annex to renovate and the use is wide open. It can be rented, it can be more recreation. And if we have to put the office staff in there, we've kind of, it would be usable, but I feel like that's a beautiful space that George told us last time is probably not ideal for offices, but it really could be an attractive, little dance studio on one side and a community meeting room, or I'd kind of prefer if everything could go together, if we're looking at this modular.
I think we should probably.
I totally am happy to explore.
I think we should keep looking at everything together until we feel like we can't do that, and maybe we'll make an indoor pickleball court up there. Okay, so that's my proposal, and I think I'm trying to summarize the consensus is that we get a finer point on pricing options 5, and then the type of modular that would be used in 4/4A. And again, open and hoping that the church would consider discussing option 2 with us. Does that seem to meet the consensus of the board? Director Deppie.
Do we have a price on option 2?
No. Oh, but
that at least in hand.
I have no problem with doing that. I guess, George, would that, what kind of factors are going to go into your pricing? I guess it's going to be a little bit about grading, of course, the difference of the buildings. Anything else?
Well, I think that I'm thinking about both the question and the answer to the question. At the point you're at right now, the able to do would be a very conceptual estimate. I mean, there's no geotechnical report on the site. There's no structural, foundation plan, framing plan. We haven't talked about a mechanical system. So you would put together. I mean, you could make some assumptions. That's what we would do. We would work with a cost estimator to, do what in the business would be called a very early conceptual estimate. If that is acceptable, and quite frankly, it is the only type of estimate you could do unless you authorize either us or another architectural firm and other engineers to do a lot more work. So if you didn't do that and we're dealing with a conceptual estimate, then including numbers for option 2 would not be whatever the cost of that study would be. It wouldn't be a significant added cost. You would, I mean, it's some additional work, but it wouldn't be significant.
Okay. And at this point, authorizing the geotechnical on the site, because it seems to me that would be an important element to maybe put together now. Does anyone disagree with that? Or what do you think, George?
I think if you're seriously considering this, which it sounds like, you are, I mean, of all the different sites that you've looked at, it does make sense to do it. In fact, I might suggest you do that before you authorized anything else, because if you did select this site, ultimately you would have to do it, right? So that's a cost you would eventually have to do. I think what you wouldn't want to do is to conclude that you do want to do one of them and then do the study and find out you can't do it because, you know, it uncovers something, in which case you just spent the money, you know, that you wouldn't have spent if you had done it first. So I think, you know, when you look at it that way, I think as long as, you know, it looks like this is one of the top considerations. I mean, you know, obviously it's not final, but that you're still looking at it, I would recommend doing that immediately and maybe hold off on the cost until you get that information. The information you get, I think, would also help develop a more realistic cost.
I agree. Any of the board members, I saw hands up and down, anyone else? Yeah, that's why I raised it. I think it would be at this point worth at least looking at that, because that is, we are considering it. And again, in order to considering it, to continue considering it, we should probably get a geotechnical. Director Deppie?
What does that in practical terms entails, you know, cost, and you're going to dig some holes or do some excavation? What are you going to determine? What's the deliverable on that?
We get a geotechnical report, maybe, I don't know if.
Well, I think I think because of the zone you're in here, you would do an initial study that was very similar to what you did on, was it 303, you know, Arlington. I think that would be the first thing you would do. And then coming out of that would be a second, you know, I mean, there might be further, you know, work that would need to be done. I would, you know, I think the geotechnical firm that you use there is extremely knowledgeable of this area. I think they would be a good candidate to, I think, you know, we could very quickly get a proposal from them on, you know, what this would entail, and then you could consider that.
And that would be for the whole parking lot?
Yeah, I think,
and
yes.
The hillside and the parking lot is.
Well, I think.
And that could potentially come back and say you can't do anything.
Well, they probably say you could do something, but it might be so expensive that you wouldn't ever want to do it. But yes, I think here you're going to have to, if you do work on this site, or select this site, you're going to have to do that study because you're required to do it, given the zone you're in. So that's why I think if this is a serious consideration, it would make sense to do it now.
Anything else, Director Deppie? Your hand's still up.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. I think that makes actually a lot of sense myself. I just also want to say that Director Logan has lost his Wi-Fi and is trying to get back. So just keep an eye out in case anybody sees him trying to get back in the meeting. It's kind of a bummer.
I wanted to suggest that Mr. Myers kind of supervise the geotechnical selection and explanation and coordination with the firm, because he has the background to do that. If that's acceptable to him.
Do we need to pass a motion?
Okay. I was hoping that Director Logan would be able to get back on before we took any official action. And I just want to ask General Counsel Dan for geotechnical study from your perspective.
I think it would really depend on how much it costs. You might want to authorize a particular amount, because I'm concerned that the general manager's usual spending authority might not be enough.
Any ballparks from either George or Tony on amounts to suggest? Was 10 enough?
Well, you know, what I would suggest is get the proposal first, and because I think they're going to break it into a couple of different phases. I mean, I can't speak for them without calling them, but I'd be surprised if in a week to 10 days you wouldn't get the proposals anyway, and then you could evaluate whether that's something you want to pursue.
Well, I think we're pretty familiar with the what it involves having done 303. I mean, I have a hard time imagining we don't want to pursue it if it's not more than a certain amount. Tony, do you have a suggestion?
I haven't been involved in a geotechnical study for many years.
Well, I think the initial study would be under 10,000 for the initial study. Okay. I'm just not sure about the next step after that. If they find something, I mean, because the first step is going to be a lot of research on this site, although they may have data on it. I mean, that's why I think it makes sense to talk to them first.
Okay, well, slow down, a whole nother month without an action. We're here, we've gone over this quite a bit. I don't see a reason why not to proceed with a certain amount authorized. I'm willing to authorize up to $10,000.
I'll make a motion that we authorize $10,000 for a geotechnical study of the Arlington Avenue parking lot.
And I'll second that. And so the clerk will take. You're muted. You're still muted.
I'm sorry, I'm muted. Okay, I'm sorry.
All right.
It's good. Lady Director Deppie,
Yes.
Vice President Logan,
Yes.
Director Natoli,
Yes.
Director Shara Swat,
Yes.
and President Hassai.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. And I think it's with consideration, and we have plenty of options to look at places that we could be developing those things. Unless I'm mistaken, Tony, then we would go on to considering thinking about utilizing a commercial real estate broker in addition to the other efforts we're making.
Yes, I just had a question of George too on this. Is George still around? Okay.
Yes.
Would the geotechnical study encompass the whole of the lot, or just the options that the board looked at that
No, I think they'd be less concerned about what the design is and more concerned about the lot itself and what's there. And I did look up, I was able to find it, believe it or not. Alan Crop for the 303 Arlington study, which is different because there's an existing building there, but I think it would be a similar initial study. And it was $9,860.
George, could you send me a copy of that study?
Yeah.
Would that be easy?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay, great. And if you could please make sure to submit this option 5. And I don't know how we do this, but I want to make sure that it's incorporated into any consideration of this meeting, because this was discussed, and how would we make sure that we could add this to our website, because this is an important topic, and how would we make sure that this which wasn't in the packet?
Yeah, we will revise the basic.
No, I know you will, but I just want to know, how do we get it into the public record?
Oh, okay, sure.
If I get a copy, I can post it to the website.
And it would be posted under this meeting?
Yes, if it's legal to do that.
I'm asking general counsel, yeah.
Okay, it's part of the record, since you could note that it was presented, and include as an attachment to the minutes this new diagram.
Well, I've been suggesting that we create a section of our website that relates to the police relocation. So I would like to encourage our staff to begin to do that, like we did with the community center. It needs its own area. It could be under police, but I would prefer that it's not, because it's really for the entire district. It's not just the police station. So I again, perhaps within the coming, weeks, we could get some of these important documents, that options that show the temporary location plan, that show these plans, all these meetings that we're having around these issues, as we did with the community center renovation. I think it's really time to begin to do that. And if we need to get help to do that, that's fine. But I think it's an important piece, because this could be up there, this could have been up there on a section on the relocation. So we'll make sure it's included in the minutes, and perhaps there'll be a way just on the homepage to put up, these 5 options in one document potentially, or something, or two, whatever. I will let you guys figure
But
that
I
out.
don't believe the current staff is trained to that adept with the website, so we might need some outside help on that.
Streamline could probably help.
Streamline?
Yeah, it's not that hard. If they can know how to post, they could probably, they basically could do this, and I think we could help if we can. In any case, let's go on to item 3. We have only 20 minutes unless we extend the meeting, and I could make a motion that we extend till 10:15 just in case. Since we're.
I'm going to say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to make a motion that we extend the meeting to 10:15 so that we don't have to stop in the middle of this discussion. Is there a second? Okay, then let's start talking fast. Director Saraswat.
I just want to mention that broker, I favor this. We spoke with a commercial real estate broker briefly while we were researching sites around Kensington. We're told, first of all, there's not much commercial real estate around Kensington to be had. So we didn't pursue that, Director Deppie and myself, at that time, but time has marched on and COVID has occurred. So I'm happy to have the GM work with a commercial broker to see what's coming online in the next 6 months, if anything. That, no stone, we'll turn them over.
I think that's one of what most people do. I also think, again, trying to be flexible and creative, that again, this involves talking to the police chief and thinking about if there are ways to break up certain aspects, like, for example, storage of multiple police cars, or the changing room. Does it have to be located in the same site? Is it possible that storage of police cars could be located outside of Kensington? That a locker room could be located outside of Kensington without much difficulty? I mean, again, trying to avoid some of these, very difficult decisions. I was just thinking, I don't know, whatever possibilities there are, but I think a commercial real estate broker could be helpful. Director,
Are you done, Michelle? Okay. Yeah, I think we really, and also be flexible about what we need, and not be married to the idea that the administration have to be with the police. I mean, if we're going to start looking at real estate, then we really need to look at having the administration in one place, the police in another. I've always thought that that's actually a better solution, but there's no reason why we need to have one big space if we're really pressed and we can't find a place to put the police anywhere, having to be all in one place.
Director Natoli.
I would say that just have the broker, don't give them a square footage that it has to be this, what can they find, and maybe we see, can we make it work?
Yeah, I think there's a chicken and eggs. I think there is, they do want to know what is it you want and what is it you need. But on the other hand, if they're creative enough and they understand what we're looking for, more or less, they could come with some ideas that we may not have thought of, or some things. So that I think it's a bit of a give and take myself. Director Natoli.
Well, I would just say that some of the administration provides support for the makes it more difficult for the police. We're already short-staffed. The police are short-staffed already. And by moving their assistance and their help, it just is going to complicate their life.
I was thinking also myself, I know that's what Director Deppy said. I was thinking not necessarily about splitting them up by function or move. I would like the idea of keeping everyone together because the administrative, there is a lot of support for the police. And I believe that having the general manager in the same space as the police chief is an important part of the civilian, control over our police that we, worked really hard to affect. I was thinking more around other functions such as, like I mentioned, a locker room, storage, car storage, and potentially,
But even the car storage, part of the issue is protection of the police cars. And if you have secured storage for them, it's better than having them located in different locations. I mean, some of this is wishful thinking, but doesn't make a lot of practical sense.
Albany police may not be, an absolute necessity. Again, this is, there are lots of wants and then there are needs and then there's what you can have.
But if you look at Albany, it's in a very well-lit area that has, it's not an isolated area. Even at night, there's cars going by that area. You're talking about places like with 303 and the park that are very isolated.
Well, our current place behind a building, is pretty isolated too. I mean, there's no secure parking there either. But anyway, again, experience with a commercial broker, I think it's important that whoever is chosen has no ties to the district, because anyone who, lives in the district or has close ties to the district, anything they do could be viewed, potentially problematically. So that would be like one of my concerns, that they're not tied to they don't live in Kensington and have any kind of conflict of interest that way. Tony, do you have anything else to add about, how these arrangements work or costs or anything like that?
I was, it appears to me that there's general concurrence to go ahead and try to find a commercial real estate broker and then report back to the board. Is that accurate?
I would be fine with that.
I'm not sure exactly how to contact. I could just ask around and ask other agencies that have used this function before to see if I can get some references. But if the board has any references that they know of that are outside of Kensington, if you wanted to forward them to me, I would take a look at them.
Okay. Okay. I should just see if there's any other public comment on this item, even though it's sort of part of the same item. And we're really giving staff direction. We're not really making any other decision. Is there any public comment? No. Okay. All right. So I think we're giving direction to the general manager to examine the option of working with a commercial real estate broker. And we are 1 minute away from having had to extend the meeting. So I believe we've completed our actions. The rest of the agenda includes general manager's report and director comments. Are there any director comments at this time? None. And general manager's report?
Yes, would the board like me to go through that report item by item, just summarize it?
I personally have read it and have no questions. Does anyone have any questions about the general manager's report? Okay, seeing none. So I believe we're going to be out for an email from our general manager to schedule a special meeting. And our next regular meeting is, October 10th, if I'm correct. Can anyone confirm that for me? I believe it is October 10th, Thursday, October 10th.
October 13th.
Sorry, thank you. Thursday, October 13th will be our next regular meeting. Thank you. And good night, everybody, and take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.